happen ASAP, please.
Sarah, are you trying to talk? You're on mute, and we were addressing Savannah.
Mm-hmm.
Savannah, did you hear Jesse?
Who's also on mute.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Savannah.
Welcome, Dolores. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. We have quorum.
Hey.
Okay, just want to make sure that you guys can hear me now.
Yes, now you have sound.
Jesse, Janine, I know the board, the committee is here. HPD, are you comfortable with us getting started?
I think we are. We're waiting for one member of the team, but we're waiting for Ahmed, but he might be able to join us in a few minutes.
Yeah, no, Ahmed's gonna be late, like by 20 minutes or more, I think. So we should just get started.
Perfect.
It's okay to get started with you all. Janine, we have a quorum. Is that correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I want to see who's here because we'll introduce ourselves. Can I be heard well enough?
Yes, you can, but you're a little close to the camera.
Okay, I'll step back now. I can't see myself. There I am. So I want to welcome everybody to this meeting. I want to welcome HPD. I want to welcome the public. I want to welcome our committee members. My name is Jean-Daniel Noland. I'm the chair of the Hell's Kitchen Land Use and Zoning Committee. This is Manhattan Community Board 4. This is not our regular time for a meeting, but this will be a regular committee meeting. As you know, we are now allowed to do it by Zoom again, I think until January. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse. So the same protocols and procedures that we had before, we'll be doing again. This will be recorded and we will have a presentation. We will have questions, comments from the committee and questions and comments from the public. And we encourage everybody that wants to talk will be able to talk. This is an open meeting. This is a public meeting. This is a neighborhood that welcomes a diversion of opinions. I want to say one thing before we start. There's no bad faith here on anybody's side. There are no villains here. This is a neighborhood. This is a community. We're going to have different opinions, but we're going to run into each other tomorrow on the street. And we'll run into each other years from now because this is an old time neighborhood where people stay. So let's keep that in mind as we start. But before we start, I'm JD. Janine Pretenti, raise your hand, Janine. She's going to manage this meeting for us. And she's a taskmaster, so we better behave. And I'd like to introduce the committee. And I can't see everybody at the moment, so I'm JD. I can see Dolores. Introduce yourself, please.
Dolores Rubin.
Bob? You there, Bob?
Yeah, hi. Bob Benfato, public member of the Land Use Committee.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome. Frank, I think I see Frank. Yes, no?
Hi, Frank Halzubiak, member of CB4 in this committee.
Welcome, Frank. Paul, I see you. Are you there, Paul?
Hi, Paul Devlin, member of the Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee.
Welcome. And Chris, I see Chris.
Hello, testing a new microphone. Hope you can all hear me today. Christopher LeBron, member of the Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee.
Welcome, Chris. Brian, I see Brian.
Hello, Brian Weber, public member of the Land Use Committee.
Welcome, Brian. Leslie, I think I see you there. Leslie?
Yes, Les Williams, member of the Land Use Committee.
Welcome, Leslie. James? James Wallace, are you there? Are you on mute, James? Finally, we got you on mute. Oh, well, Joe, you're here, I think.
Yes, Joe Restuccia, member of the Land Use Committee and co-chair of Housing, Health and Human Services.
Welcome, Joe. And I see that Jesse Bodine is here. I want to welcome Jesse. I also want to welcome Lowell Kern, the chair of this board. Have I forgotten any committee members?
We missed two members,
Who? Tell me who.
Dale and Sarah.
Sarah.
Hi, guys.
there you
I'm
are.
Sarah Mills. Good to see everyone.
Welcome, Sarah. Who else did we miss?
Dale, say hi, Dale.
Oh,
Hi, everyone.
welcome, Dale.
We also have Ted Arness, our newest member.
Yes, Ted, welcome. I see you over there. You look comfortable. Nice couch. Welcome, Ted. Anyway, let's get started with this meeting. This is going to be a presentation by HPD of a proposed development we all know about. It's on 9th Avenue between 54th and 53rd. It's MTA, the Metropolitan Transit Authority, has a site there. We've talked about this for a long time. I think the community is pretty aware of it, but I think it's very important that we are grounded of the history, about the history of the site before we start our discussion. So I've asked Professor Joe Restuccia.
JD, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I just give a brief run of show just for the folks that are in attendees section. So folks who want to eventually speak on this topic who are in the attendees, you should be pressing, your raised hand function on the bottom of your screen there. You can always, of course, use the Q&A function as well if you want to write down your question. That's fine, and we can sort of try to handle it that way. And then if anybody that's calling in just through the phone, you do *9, which will raise your hand through the phone number. We'll see that there on our screen, and we'll be able to give you access to speak. And *6 is to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Jesse. I forgot that. That's the most important thing. Thank you so much, Jesse. To get us started, let's have a little summary of the history of this site so we can have a discussion with some background. Joe Restuccia is a member of this committee. He's also the co-chair of the Housing and Human Services Committee. And Joe has been involved with this site for a long time. So Joe, would you please give us some history about this?
Sure. Ginny, can you put up the presentation? And we will be posting the presentation on our community board website probably in the next couple of days. So we thought it was important to just understand that we have a site that has a lot of history and context, and we wanted to lay that out for the members of the committee and the public and the applicants. Next, please. This site really began back in 2001, 2005 as part of the Hudson Yards rezoning. That was for rezoning and redevelopment of eastern and western rail yards, a huge swath of west of Hell's Kitchen, south of 42nd Street. Original proposal had no affordable housing whatsoever, and the lack of affordable housing, and at that point, the inclusion of a West Side Stadium on the western rail yards, which becomes very important because that's where this project comes from, the western rail yards, was a main bone of contention with the Bloomberg administration. Next, please. We started our discussion with the Bloomberg administration with one guiding principle. This is from the initial part of the Clinton Special District zoning, and it was adopted back in 1973. Very specifically, we talked about, and it's a quote, to permit rehabilitation and new construction within the area, which will not substantially alter the mixture of income groups currently residing in the area. The concern at that point in time that has continued through those decades is that we have a wide range of income groups and that all need to be served. Next. So between 2001 and 2005, we began to enter into negotiations with the Bloomberg administration, HPD, and city planning regarding affordable housing. The original proposal had no affordable housing. And then only low-income housing was proposed. It was modified finally for low, moderate, middle-income housing. Originally, there was a voluntary inclusionary housing for people making less than 80%. There was a district improvement bonus to get money to the city's coffer for the Hudson Yards bonds, and affordable units would only be in privately owned buildings. After a lot of back and forth, the city agreed that the district improvement bonus and the inclusionary housing would be side by side. You could not get one bonus without the other. And then they also said that now you could use tax exempt financing that created 80/20s to get your bonus and make those units permanent. That was very good, but the consequence was it drove all of those units produced down to 60% of AMI, low income, in order to qualify for the tax exempt financing in a standard 80/20. Finally, on the zoning side, we agreed that there would be not only bonuses for 60 to 80% of AMI, so low and beginning of moderate, but also for moderate and middle, 125 and 165% of AMI. And that was the zoning portion. And it was agreed in total as these are the city's numbers, that would produce 2,442 units. Next. But HPD stated, however, the majority of inclusionary units would really be for low-income households. And informed CB4, which we had a hard time getting our heads around at that point, that the public sites should be used for moderate and middle-income housing, those with the no acquisition or almost zero acquisition. MCB4 then went out and did a survey of the entire district from 14th Street to 59th Street, found every kind of public site, whether it was owned by the city or a state agency or some sort of federal something, and gave a map and list of sites. In the Hudson Yards points of agreement, 3 sites were actually included. Site M, acquired for the number 7 line for a station that was never built on 41st and 10th, a NYCHA parking lot and basketball court on West 55th Street in Harborview houses, and Studio City, now known as Gotham West, which was originally acquired for school construction. During that 05 negotiation, HPD rejected the MTA site, saying it was too complicated because it was owned by a state authority. Next. So we have now a final agreement. That agreement was a broad range for under voluntary inclusionary housing. There were anti-harassment provisions put in there. Those public sites would be for the production of moderate and middle income housing. And we actually have in the points of agreement a signed document between the mayoral administration and the city council saying how many units at each site and the range of income. And you can see in this slide that the incomes range from 60%, 135, 165, full range of incomes throughout all the sites. And the moderate and middle income units were on the public sites, not the private sites. Next. Hudson Yards was certified for rezoning in 04. It was adopted in 05. In the spring of 05, the West Side Stadium plan fell apart. Our resolution, which you see a picture of the cover there, was 130 pages in response to the Hudson Yards rezoning. And that meant once the stadium fell off the western rail yards, the entire plan had to be reconceived for that portion. And the community and the mayor's office agreed that the 3 western rail yards blocks would be redeveloped as residential housing, commercial buildings with a large public open space. Over a number of years, we had discussed this back and forth. And again, we raised the issue of affordable housing. Next. However, we also dealt with the West Chelsea rezoning. Manufacturing areas west of 10th Avenue, a way to preserve the High Line. Again, the city included no affordable housing and became a major issue of discussion. Next. We went through the same process. But in the document for the West Chelsea, we actually have a quote of text that says specifically, there will be a more diverse range of incomes for affordable housing. With roughly 900 affordable units through the inclusionary housing program on public sites, over 40% will be targeted for moderate and middle income families. That was the main issue the community had pursued for a long time, to make sure our community, as it is being redeveloped and rezoned, would not just be for the highest income and for the lowest income with no in between. And in fact, that voluntary inclusionary housing change, the range of incomes that had already been adopted in Hudson Yards, was adopted into West Chelsea. Next. Even with that, again, there were not a lot of low and moderate income units. HPD again said it should be public sites, and 2 public sites, one on Chelsea NYCHA, 401 West 25th Street, and Chelsea NYCHA Fulton houses, West 18th Street between 9th and 10th were developed, were designated. Both of those have been developed. And there's a soft commitment for the future redevelopment of the Department of Sanitation site on 20th Street. Next. And you now see that 128 units, 100 affordable units for moderate and middle in both those locations were developed and came to fruition along with the voluntary inclusionary housing. The community board tracks the production in Hudson Yards and in West Chelsea on a quarterly basis and actually produces a report that we can make available and put on the website. There's an affordable housing fund created too out of the highlight. Next. So we then get to the Western Rail Yards, the last piece of the whole Hudson Yards rezoning. We again went back to the sites of the maps we had started with in 2001. The Western Rail, but however, this became more sophisticated. By the time the city of New York came to our community, they included two sites, the DEP site, 705 10th Avenue between 40th and 49th, and the MTA site, 806 9th Avenue that we're talking about tonight, in the ULURPs for the Western Rail Yards. They agreed to rezone parts of Western Clinton from manufacturing to residential. And as part of the negotiation, we had a points of agreement for the third time. And housing commitments, certain ones could not be triggered until Related acquired title to the Western Rail Yards. And also the DEP site was still under construction for the third water tunnel. The agreement got executed in 12/10, and the zoning was adopted for not Hudson Yards, but for the Western Rail Yards, 12/21/09. Next. We got a series of issues to protect housing. The most important one was anti-demolition commitments. They had been agreed to under Hudson Yards and West Chelsea, but never implemented. That became the first thing that was agreed to and settled. That extended the demolition restriction from not just Clinton Special Zoning District, but areas, Hell's Kitchen subdistrict of Hudson Yards, the preservation area of the Garment Center, and the entire West Chelsea, Special West Chelsea District. Related committed to build 431 units on the Eastern and Western Rail Yards, permanently affordable. We got up to 150 units of SRO preservation. The Lantern buildings on West 51st Street are an example of that. Section 8's buildings that Related owned on West 47th and West 48th and West 30th Streets were now extended for an additional 40-year period of affordability. Another two buildings Related owned on 56th Street and 23rd Street were also extended for affordable and made permanently affordable at a slightly higher rate. And if you note, it's 90% and 125% of AMI upon vacancy to create moderate and middle income units. And then a bunch of non-affordable housing commitments we listed just for reference. Next. And embodied in that points of agreement, Western Rail Yards points of agreement, were specific details for an RFP for the DEP and MTA sites. A height cap of 77 feet for DEP, an 85-foot height cap on 9th Avenue for MTA, and a 99-foot cap on the mid-block. I would like to note that those public meetings were fraught with difficulty and disagreement, but we still forged an agreement in the end of the community to support this ULURP. Those two would create 267 affordable units. The AMI mix was 165 or under, 50% or 2 or more bedroom units, and permanently affordable. Part of the process is HPD would share the program overview before releasing RFPs, and they would agree that they would not be used for any inclusionary bonuses. And then there was a final thing for the sanitation side on West 20th Street, and again, the agreement to do affordable housing there. Next. Planning and negotiation for the MTA site. Next. So 2013 to 2015, we had no communication from HPD whatsoever. New mayor comes in 2015. Under the new administration, the community board spent a great deal of time working with a number of stakeholders and developed an affordable housing plan, which we modified and amended in all those years since. And it included the DEP and the MTA sites. We made sure we had a more exact income mix for both MTA and DEP sites. And we wrote to then Commissioner Vicky Bean requesting to begin discussions for this RFP. We noted that the DEP site could work for another, the DEP work would be another 2 or 3 years, so we should work on the RFP during the same time. Next. By the way, that affordable housing plan was widely disseminated throughout all levels of city and state government. We again, in February of 2017, asked for the RFP to be developed. We had one meeting with HPD, February 5th, 2018. That was a presentation to our land use committee. in which the HPD planning representative stated the RFP would now have to include a 15% homeless requirement. Although we disagreed because we had already, this was a prior agreement, MCB4 understood and made it clear that family housing is preferred. At HPD's request, the community board developed a presentation of the site requirements to be included in the RFP. And in fact, it was included and it's on our website. The other items are merely supporting documents. Next. This is an important piece of information. Between 2019 and 2021, we learned first that this site would now be supportive housing as opposed to moderate middle income housing. We learned that from a press release. We had one meeting in September of 2019 with the city council and the developers and the sponsor. We had one meeting in 2020. We had one meeting with HPD just on September 9th. And I want to note that it is quite unique and extraordinary that we, in a period of 3 years, would only have 3 meetings about a major site as part of a major commitment that was made as part of a major rezoning. Next. I thought it was important that we give context of where we are as a community. We have been very welcoming both to homeless facilities and to services and supportive housing. We have statistics that note we have 973 beds of shelter and social service facilities. In supportive housing, 2,043 beds. And in fact, in 2020, we successfully got another 75 units of supportive housing into a 350 unit permanently affordable project known as the Slaughterhouse. That was at the community board's request, and the developer and HPD were somewhat kicking and screaming to do that, but they did it. Next. We have a list of all of our supportive housing on the left and all of our social service facilities and beds on the right. It is very detailed. It is concentrated mostly in the Hell's Kitchen portion of Community Board 4. Next. Next. No, you skipped one. Go back, please. Yeah. We have mapped these out for information as to where they're located. And the map will also be on our website. To make it very clear, you can see that the majority of homeless facilities or supportive housing is north of 34th Street. Next. Next. Is it coming? Taking a while. There we go. We thought it was important also to note what has been developed through Hudson Yards affordable housing commitments, that there have been an incredible number of units, over 2,000 developed, and 1,086 are at 60% of AMI or below, which means that developed to date, 68% of the affordable housing production has been at 60% or below. And our goal always is to have balance in our community. That's the nature of it. Next. Janine, are you having problems?
Computer's having a hard time digesting all the numbers, Joe.
Okay.
No, it's the tab on here.
Do your best. We're at the very end. Gene, if you can't make it work, let me know.
Texting Jesse, but he's not answering.
So we only actually have 2 more pieces of information. I can share them, and then we can, if it shows up, it shows up.
Give me a second, Joe. I'm sorry. Her screen is freezing up. Let me open it on my end, and I'll get it. Janine, can you? I'm gonna try to stop you from sharing. I can share.
Nope. I can't get any of the buttons to work.
It's all right, Janine. I'll get it. It's okay.
Okay.
Can you try to stop your sharing then?
Yeah, it's Zoom.
All right, give me one moment.
Thanks, everybody, for putting up with our technological issues, as always.
It's opening on my end. Just give me a moment.
It's my laptop.
Someone likes to make data-rich files, Joe. Do you have it open, Joe?
No.
Okay.
I can just sum up. Jesse, let me just sum up. So we're moving ahead here. So the next one slide next has the list of all the projects developed in Hudson Yards. And then the last one just gives you a full chronology from when we started working with this site through the end and all the series of meetings. But I want to sum up by saying that for those of us on the community on the community board, we are in the 20th year of a process discussing Hudson Yards rezoning and the affordable housing that comes out of it. It is 12 years since the Western Rail Yards rezoning was approved in 2009, 5 years of which we asked for information to start this RFP, and it did not move. And in the last 3 years, we have only had 3 meetings about this very important and major project. So we have clearly some process issues that have to be resolved. And we have a project that exists not as an affordable housing site that dropped from the moon to be developed, but part of a long continuum of engagement, discussion, negotiation with 2 mayoral administrations, and it will now end up in a 3rd mayoral administration. And that's the way things are done in the city. They take a long time. And it's just the reality. We want to make sure that members of the committee, members of the public, the applicants understand that we're not looking at this as a housing site that came out of nowhere. I'll wait, Janine. Okay. That a housing site that came out of nowhere, but a housing site that has a very dense and careful history in relation to many other housing sites as part of the rezoning of the densest rezoning ever happening in the city of New York. And thank you for that piece of it. And I'll take any questions from our committee members about clarification of what's been presented.
Yeah, Joe, thank you. That's an extraordinary summation of what's been going on. I would also add a thanks to Savannah Wu. I know she did a lot of work on this. I believe we had a question or two. Dale, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Joe, thank you. And Savannah, thank you for this presentation. It's super helpful to have this history and context. I know that AMI is like the unit for discussing affordability, but I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page in terms of like what AMI translates to in respect to affordable housing. So if I understand correctly, AMI currently is calculated like 108,000 a year for 2 incomes. Is that, do I have that right?
No, we have to, it's percentage of it. You're talking about, so let me step back. And what I'll do, Dale, by the way, I'll go look for an AMI chart we can put up on the screen a little bit to sort of lay it out. Just for putting concept for everybody, there's a statistical area median income, which is the entire metropolitan area in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. And then percentages of AMI determine affordability ranges. We normally refer to below 60% of AMI as low income. And I'll get you the numbers in a moment, I have to find it, right? And then as we go up in the bands, there's moderate income, many times between 80 and let's say 125, and then middle income, 125 to 165. And that's a huge range from households making as low as 30 or 40% of AMI, 30% of AMI, like 30,000 up to 165 or 5,000. But
Right.
I don't want to misspeak the numbers. I want to give you I'll find a table and we'll put it up. Okay.
Yeah, but I guess what I was trying to do is like relate it to people's actual income. It's like if you had a double income household, they were both making New York's current minimum wage, they'd be roughly at like 60% AMI if I calculated that correctly.
I don't know. I'd rather give you the number so you can look at it.
Okay.
Thanks,
Before the
Dale.
meeting is over, I'll find it.
Thanks, Joe. Are there any clarification questions about Joe's summary here from the committee? If not, I think we can welcome HPD, Felipe or James. I'm not sure who's leading the presentation.
Yeah, James is gonna kick it off for us. I just want to thank the committee and the board for setting this up. It's a it's a special meeting, so we really appreciate that. We also appreciate the history that you guys went through and the level of detail. So just appreciate you doing that. So James, you wanna take it?
Sure, I'll get started. So good evening, CB4. My name is James Hull. I'm a planner in the Office of Neighborhood Strategies at HPD. Thanks again for hosting us tonight. I'm joined by Felipe Cortez, who's the Deputy Director of Manhattan Planning, Paris Straughter, who's the Assistant Commissioner for Planning and Pre-Development, and Ahmed Tigani, who is the Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Neighborhood Strategies. We're here with our development partners to present the Lirio, which is a project that was selected in 2019 via a competitive RFP, which, as Joe mentioned, is part of the 2009 Western Rail Yard rezoning. The project is located at 806 9th Avenue, Manhattan, Block 1044, Lot 3. The project will include approximately 112 units of permanently affordable and supportive housing. In addition to the residential program, the project will include approximately 30,000 square feet of MTA office space and subgrade parking spaces for MTA emergency response vehicles, as well as approximately 10,000 square feet of commercial space. The proposed land use actions to facilitate the project include a zoning map amendment, zoning text amendment, 2 City Planning Commission special permits, the disposition of city-owned property to allow excess development rights from the existing MTA building to be used in the proposed building, and an acquisition to acquire a condo in the proposed building for future lease to the MTA. The development team will go through the land use actions in detail during the presentation. So now I'll turn it over to our development partners, Hudson Companies and Housing Works, to take you through the project details.
Great, thank you. Thank you again to CB4 for having us here today. I just want to reiterate that we fully understand that there's a long history behind this site for which the development team was not a part of, but we are excited to present to you what we have proposed for the Lirio. My name is Sarah Pizer. I'm a development director at the Hudson Companies. I'm joined here by my colleagues Aaron, Michael, and Vanessa on the Hudson team, as well as Andrew and Colton from Housing Works. We're also joined by our architect, Brian at Setra Ready, and Judy and Jed from Brian Cave in the event that we need to get into some more technical questions on the land use actions. And we're also joined by Moonsen Park at the MTA. Before we get into the presentation, I just want to start by saying on behalf of the development team that we want to be as transparent throughout this process as possible. It's both within Hudson's and Housing Works culture to have open communication with the public, and we're happy to answer all of your questions tonight, as well as to keep the dialogue going in the future. Slide. Next slide, if possible.
Are we frozen, Jesse?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Janine, are you moving the slide forward?
Oh, there we are.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right.
So we would just like to start with a quick introduction of the team. I'll start with Hudson. Hudson has been developing in the 5 boroughs for the last 35 years. We develop all housing typologies from housing for the formerly homeless to luxury condos. We have completed over 7,800 residential units with over 5,000 more in the pipeline. We've also developed 250,000 square feet of retail space, which equates to about 100 neighborhood stores. And a lot of our projects come to us through city-run RFPs like Delirio, so we have extensive experience working with government agencies in planning and executing projects. And across our portfolio, we are committed to environmental sustainability. In 2017, we completed the house at Cornell Tech on Roosevelt Island, which was the largest building in the world to be certified to Passive House standards at the time it was completed. So we hope to bring that same level of environmental stewardship here to Delirio. I'll pass it over to Andrew for a quick Housing Works intro.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Housing Works was founded in 1990 to provide permanent supportive housing for people living with HIV and AIDS. After merging with Bailey House, we now operate 700 units of housing for formerly homeless individuals and families living with HIV and AIDS, serious mental illness, substance use disorder, and veterans. Our population ranges in age from children who are housed in our family program to young adults between 18 to 25 to adults between 25 and up. We currently own and manage 11 congregate permanent supportive housing facilities across the city. We operate 4 federally qualified health centers in both Manhattan and Brooklyn, offering a full range of primary healthcare, substance use services, and behavioral health services. We're scheduled to open one any day now, in-house kitchen on 48th Street. And most folks know us for our successful thrift store enterprise, which generates a significant amount of revenue to enhance and sustain and support our mission.
Thanks, Andrew. We can go to the next slide. So as Joe mentioned, this site was part of the Clinton Health Kitchen RFP, which was issued by HPD in April 2018. Hudson and Housing Works were designated for Site A, which is 806 9th Avenue, in March 2019. And Hudson and Housing Works proposed permanently affordable housing with supportive housing for formerly homeless long-term survivors of HIV and AIDS, along with the RFP requirement for a 30,000 square foot MTA office space. And our proposal is based around 3 main community benefits, the first of which is addressing the ongoing AIDS epidemic. So we know that the Hell's Kitchen has the highest concentration of residents living with HIV and AIDS in New York City. It's also the second highest neighborhood in Manhattan for new HIV infections. In addition, most people living with HIV in New York are over the age of 50. So we wanted to provide a unique type of supportive housing for this long-term survivor population, who often experience aging earlier than people without HIV and are often diagnosed with serious illnesses. At the same time, they aren't given the adequate financial assistance or support services required to age with care in a comfortable home and with dignity. So with Delirio, we hope to meet this pressing need for permanent affordable housing for these long-term survivors, along with supportive services built into the housing model. And this informs the name for the project. Delirio is named after the liriodendron tree, the city's oldest living tree at an estimated 400 years old. It's witnessed the entire span of New York City's history, and it has survived miraculously, so this seemed like a perfect alignment with the long-term survivor population, who has survived and persisted against the odds. Second is sustainable design. We want to practice environmental leadership by integrating green building design and targeting Passive House certification. And finally, community investment. We want to invest in placemaking with an activated ground floor program that is both an amenity to residents as well as to the neighborhood. We've heard that there's a strong community desire for a grocery store here, which we are working very hard to make a reality, and we'll get to that in a few slides. And we also want to leverage investment for maximum community benefits, including MWBE hiring and construction job placement and training. Next slide. To orient us on the site, which I know we all know well, it's on the corner of 9th Avenue and 54th Street. It is adjacent to the existing MTA facilities, the Rail Control Center and Power Control Center. The site is currently being used as a parking lot for the MTA and is under the MTA's ground lease. The red outline here is the proposed building footprint, and the black line is the zoning lot 3, which we share a zoning lot with the Rail Control Center and Power Control Center. The development site area is 21,500 square feet, and the current zoning district is C15R8 in the preservation area of the Special Clinton District. Next slide. Here are some site photos from 9th and 54th. Next slide. Okay, so in order to enable the development of Delirio, we're proposing the 6 following land use actions. As James alluded to, there's first the disposition of city-owned property. So the existing UDAP from 2009 already approved the disposition of this property to a developer to be selected by HPD. But this land use action allocates excess development rights available in the zoning lot owned by the city to Delirio. This disposition of this negative easement constitutes a disposition of city-owned property. Second is city acquisition of a condominium. Once construction is complete, we will convey the MTA condo back to the city, which will include the cellar parking, ground, and second floor office. 3 and 4 here have to do with lot coverage. So the existing transit facilities on the zoning lot have a high lot coverage to begin with. And so adding the proposed development would not comply with existing lot coverage requirements. So we're proposing to establish a special permit to modify lot coverage. Given that we would be creating a special permit, our proposed zoning text amendment would be very carefully crafted so as to only be applicable to this site. The language would state that the special permit is only to support the expansion of an existing public transit facility. We would also include other language to make it very specific to this site. 4 is the use of that special permit. 5, it has to do with height and setback regulation modifications. So on 9th Avenue, we're proposing a max building height of 85 feet or 8 stories, which is as of right for the max building height, and also consistent with the Western Rail Yards points of agreement and CB4 recommendations. On 54th Street, we are proposing a max building height of 99 feet or 9 stories, which is not as of right. As of right would be 66 feet max building height beyond 100 feet of 9th. But the Western Rail Yards points of agreement states that the height should not exceed 99 feet on the mid-block, and the CB4 recommendation further clarifies that the height is not to exceed 99 feet beyond 50 feet of 9th Avenue, and we do comply with this. And then finally, a rezoning from C15R8 and R8 districts to C62 district. And note that the existing location within the preservation area of the Special Clinton District would not change. So this is a rezoning of a portion of the block, including the existing MTA facilities, the Midtown Community Court, the police precinct, and a few other buildings on the block. And we'll look at this area in the next slide. There are 3 reasons for, sure, we can stay on the slide. But I just want to discuss the reasons for the rezoning. So first of all, there's a commercial floor area deficit on the site. So the MTA constructed the Rail Control Center under its zoning exemption. So they actually overbuilt the lot with respect to commercial floor area. So when we, as a private applicant on the zoning lot, file at DOB, the zoning calculations must show that there is sufficient remaining floor area on the zoning lot for the project's proposed uses. And so that would be allowed under the C62 district. Second is that the proposed zoning would reflect existing land use of the block. So the proposed C62 district would make the MTA facilities a conforming use, in addition to the existing courthouse and police precinct located east of the RCC. And the third reason is that Delirio will have a commercial use on the second story, which is the MTA office space. The existing zoning district does not allow commercial use on a second story. So I want to note that while the C62 designation would broaden the range of permitted commercial uses, it is very unlikely that any of the other parcels included in the rezoning would have any increased development potential due to this rezoning. The proposed C62 district will not change the Special Clinton District preservation area's existing height and setback limitations, yard and lot coverage regulations. It also maintains the current total max FAR of 4.2. So we feel very confident that this rezoning is not going to have any impact beyond the site. We are happy to answer more questions about this after the presentation. All right, next slide. So this is the proposed massing. We're proposing a building which would be 130,000 zoning square feet. As I mentioned, the proposed height is 9 stories with a max height of 85 feet on 9th Ave and max height of 99 feet on 54th. As I mentioned, on 54th Street, we are not as of right, but on both 9th and 54th, we are in compliance with both the Western Rail Yards points of agreement and the CB4 recommendation. Next slide. So getting into the building program. So we are proposing 112 units of permanently affordable housing, the breakdown of which would be 67 units for formerly homeless individuals. Of those, there would be 59 units of supportive housing for long-term survivors of HIV and AIDS, and 44 units of affordable housing up to 80% of the AMI. I want to note that we originally proposed an affordability distribution of up to 60% AMI, but after hearing from the community that higher AMIs here were desired, we worked very hard with HPD to create a tier of units at 80%. And we'll look at what that looks like with household incomes and rents in a couple of slides. We're also planning for 1,500 square feet of community space for support services, a 5,600 square foot accessible landscape terrace, which would be available to all residents, and Housing Works would be providing on-site case management and specialty programming. And we do hit that 50% ratio for 2 bedrooms and larger in our unit distribution, which we will look at in a minute. Next slide. I'll turn it over to Andrew for this one.
Sure. So I wanted to point out that supportive housing is the foundation of our approach at Housing Works for integrated care. And our integrated care approach will help end the epidemic of HIV in New York and is the single most predictive variable for improved health outcomes for people with HIV. 80% of the clients in our supportive housing programs are virally suppressed or undetectable, meaning they are unable to transmit the virus. The citywide average for HIV positive patients is 74. Adherence to a therapy regimen is critical to viral suppression, and our supportive housing clients make 82% of scheduled primary care appointments. So our folks who live in housing keep their doctor's appointments at a rate much higher than the general public. In addition to on-site case management and specialty programming, residents of the Lirio will have convenient access to our new HIV-specific primary and behavioral health care at our new Hell's Kitchen FQHC on 48th Street. And as I mentioned, this is in walking distance of the area.
Next slide. So here is the proposed affordability distribution along with unit sizes. So as I mentioned, 60% of the units would be available to formerly homeless individuals, but there is a tier of those units as 2 bedrooms, so there could be some for families as well. But we did want to concentrate most of those formerly homeless units on the studios. And then the affordable housing is between 40 and 80% AMI, mostly 2 bedrooms and a few 3 bedrooms. Next slide. And here is what it looks like with the 2021 AMIs. So to answer the earlier question, there's an income limit of $119,300 for a family of 4. That would be 100% AMI. So here, the Lirio could be home to a single parent making $76,000 per year and paying just under $2,000 per month for a 2-bedroom unit. And we can return to this slide if there are questions. But let's move on to the next slide. So I'm just going to give a very high-level description of the MTA component of the project. So we do have representatives from the MTA here to answer more questions. But there will be a 30,000 square foot office space in the Lirio. It will be adjacent to the Rail Control Center, which is the nerve center of the subway system. And the MTA would be relocating employees from the RCC to the Lirio to rebalance space to accommodate new technologies and additional assigned staff. There will be parking in the cellar for emergency response vehicles. within the Lirio, but we are told that there will be no sirens and no personal parking for MTA employees. Next slide. In terms of retail, we're proposing 7,100 square feet of retail on the ground floor and 2,800 square feet of cellar retail. So we know that there's a strong desire for a grocery store here. If the original plan was to have a Housing Works store operate a portion or a piece of the retail that we can have here, but if we can get a grocer into the space that needs the entire retail square footage, we have discussed sacrificing the Housing Works store, so that's very much a conversation that is still ongoing. We worked with Street Sense, which is a consultant that does retail strategy, to help define what types of grocers may be most interested in the space given the market, given our square footage constraints, distance to other grocery stores, and other location factors. And we're also in the process of bringing on a broker who can pound the pavement and do direct outreach to grocery stores on our behalf. As I mentioned, we are planning to build the Lirio to passive house standards, which essentially just means a super tight building envelope, which allows us to use less heating and cooling, resulting in lower utility bills for our residents. And we'll also have green roofs and rooftop solar. Next slide. So here's our rendering. The building will be masonry with punched windows. The windows are of a residential scale. There are no large ribbons of glass here. The brick colors complement other brick found in the neighborhood, which we believe makes this building contextual to similarly sized buildings and lots in the neighborhood. The retail would be along the 9th Avenue commercial corridor, and the residential entrance would be on 54th Street and punctuated by a 2-story high glass wall. And then the MTA entrance is further down 54th Street, adjacent to the existing MTA facility. Next slide. Here's an aerial rendering of the Lirio where you can see the green roofs and rooftop solar. Next slide. Here's our current ground floor plan. As I mentioned, the retail would be taking up 7,100 square feet. There would be the residential lobby off of 54th Street, which would be 767 square feet. The MTA office would be about 12,500 square feet on the ground floor, as well as on the second floor. And you can see the ramp going down from 54th Street to the MTA parking in the cellar. Next slide. So, the development team remains committed to being as transparent as possible throughout this process. Pre-pandemic, we toured a couple of block associations through the Bailey Holt House, which is an example of supportive housing run by Housing Works, to give community members more context on what we're trying to build here. We've also met frequently with the Manhattan Borough President's Office, the Speaker's Office, and City Council Land Use, as well as CB4 leadership. Next slide. And here's just a quick schedule. We, as I mentioned, we were designated in March 2019. We started design immediately thereafter, and that is still ongoing. We submitted our EAS to HPD Environmental in February 2020, and we are very close to being able to finalize that document. We are hoping to certify into ULURP this fall. And while we don't have a timeline for construction loan closing, we would start construction as quickly as possible after closing, and that would be a 24-month projected construction period. Next slide. Okay, that's all that we have for you today for the presentation. We can revisit any of these slides, but of course we want to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Andrew, and thank you, James, and thank you, team. I'm sure there will be some questions and some comments. I'm going to open it up first to the committee. I'm going to reiterate, I think we have a lot of speakers, so I'm hoping the committee will be as concise as we can be, so we can also open it up to the public. So again, HPD, Andrew, Hudson, thank you for this. And let's open it up. I don't see any hands. Just raise your hand, or somebody tell me who's raising their hand on the committee.
I can give you the list in order.
That'd be great, thank you.
Myself, Chris LeBron, Brian Weber, Lowell Kern, Paul Devlin,
Okay, let's start there. Go Dolores and then Chris. And who's the third one?
I'll let you know in a minute.
Okay.
So thank you for the presentation, and it's actually a wonderful project. It's just not appropriate for this community. And while I applaud what you're doing, I applaud the work of Housing Works. Our concern is that this is an example where our elected officials and HPD are not understanding the needs of this particular community and are making assumptions based on citywide issues and deciding that this community is where it should go. Joe demonstrated that this was a very carefully thought out process over almost decades, because we on the ground understand what this community needs. Having been born and raised here, one of the things that we have always prided ourselves is being a balanced community. Balanced meaning range of incomes, range of backgrounds, range of orientations. Right now, we are skewed in one direction, and this project takes us further in that direction. No one is against what we're trying to accomplish here as a city and to solve some of the problems. What we have an issue with is that this is being thrust upon us without the consultation and the understanding, which we've outlined, of what this community needs. And essentially, we're being told that the city administration knows better than the people who live here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolores. I think Chris was next. Chris, welcome, Chris.
Thank you, JD. Christopher LeBron, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, second generation here. And I've been on this committee for 3 years. In that time, I've actually never, and I want to talk about transparency, because this presentation was open with the air of transparency. I have never received one of these from a former member of the board, an advocate, a tenant association president, a block association president before. I received this. This is a pamphlet that was emailed to me anonymously with a link to our meeting and bullet points provided by Hudson and by Housing Works. I don't think I've ever come across that before. And I would ask JD or Joe Restuccia to respond if that is a common act when a developer reaches out to try to split this community apart. I find it to be wholly inappropriate. I was not going to speak this way today because I was thinking about my Uncle Murphy. He died of AIDS in 1994, and he is and was a hell of a man and a driving force for my family. I've also worked for Paul Curtis Bellman. It's one of my first jobs, MD-PC, and the man is a miracle worker. He's retired now, but what I saw him do with suppressant viral like pathology treatment of individuals with HIV and AIDS was just miraculous. This has nothing to do with the merit and spirit of this project. It has everything to do with that action right there, the lobbying of our neighbors to split this community apart. 50 years of advocacy trying to build and balance exactly what Dolores was talking about: affordable housing, schools, co-ops opportunities, green spaces, has all gone pushed aside by the de Blasio administration. I'm very disturbed by this action, and I don't think I can vote in favor of this or write a letter that would be in favor of this development. Thank you.
Lowell is going to speak. JD?
Yeah, JD, can I jump in here? Jean Danielle?
JD's frozen. Go ahead, Lowell.
All right. So I'm the chair of Community Board 4, and I can lend, Chris said he hasn't heard, too much about this in the last 3 years. I can add a little bit of background here.
In terms of lobbying, Lowell, that's what I was talking about.
Okay, well, I can add a little bit of background because there hasn't been a lot of communication on this plan at all. When this RFP was issued, we started meeting, and this was before my time as chair, but I was involved in some of these discussions, and this goes back to 2018, 2019. that what the city was proposing here was not in line with what we were promised. This community was promised certain things by the government of New York City under the Hudson Yards points of agreement. And when this plan was floated, this RFP was floated, this was not what we were promised. And I had meetings primarily with the speaker. I know Joe did, I know JD did, on and off for about 4 months in early 2020, up till about March when the pandemic hit. And then there was total silence on this, which is understandable. We finally met with Corey Johnson in August of 2020, 13 months ago. And we said, this plan is not what the community wants. It's not what we were promised. I'm not saying it's a bad plan, but it's not what we want. It's not what we need and not what we were promised. And Corey promised to work with us on that. And nothing happened for a year. We asked, to talk to HPD. We asked Corey to talk to HPD. We asked to broker a deal to come up with a plan that is closer to what we expected here and not what the city is offering. Nothing happened for a year. We met again in August of 2021. And that's what prompted the couple of meetings that HPD has pointed to that we've had leading up to this meeting. That's only in the last month that something's gone on after an RFP was issued 3 years ago. The biggest problem here is that this is not what the community was promised over a decade ago. This is not what we need. This community already does more than its fair share in terms of providing accommodation support for the homeless, for supportive housing. We do more than anywhere else in the city. We cannot take on any more supportive housing, formerly homeless housing, whatever it is. There's too much already, and it's burying this neighborhood. One of the things that Joe pointed out earlier was that when we were talking about affordable housing here, we asked for a focus on families. And the list that HPD just had up there shows that almost half of the units are studios for formerly homeless individuals. That's not families. That's not keeping the community the same. That's not letting a breadth of individuals and different incomes, different needs into the community. This is burying the community with things we just can't support anymore. Too much has been asked of Hell's Kitchen for us to take on this project right now. And it is what the board has been working on consistently, going back to when, I was an infant and Joe was on the board. That we have been asking for the same thing over and over again for almost 2 decades. We've been asking for it for the last 3 years since this RFP has been issued. We have been trying to meet with our elected officials to try and help us deal with HPD and the developer here. And it's just not happening. And, at this point, from a community board force standpoint, enough is enough. And I'm going to get off my soapbox now, JD, and give you back your committee.
Paul, Lowell, thank you so much. Paul Devlin, I think you were next. Paul, welcome.
Thanks. I don't know that I was next, but I'll take the opportunity while I have it. The one thing I'm distressed about with this presentation is that HPD is very quick to point out where they do conform to the Western Rail Yards Agreement, such as composition of number of 2-bedroom units, about the heights on 54th Street and 9th Avenue, but zero mention of the agreement that there's 165% AMI in that agreement. And you're at 80%, but you don't even mention anything about the other parts of the agreement. So you're taking credit where you want to take credit for the Western Rail Yards Agreement, but you're neglecting one of the most significant components that's critical to this community, is having a higher income band, number of units, and to be at 80% when the agreement is 165 just seems disingenuous. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Brian Weber, are you?
Hi,
are
JD.
you
Thank
with
you.
us?
Thank you. I'm
Welcome.
here.
Good.
I think everyone has really articulated the depth of this situation quite extensively. I'm going to keep it very simple. This is not a conversation about the merits of what is being proposed here at all. It is a conversation about points of agreement that were wrestled with over apparently decades by members of this board. I'm a neophyte here. I've been here for only 5 years, but that is what we're talking about here. We're talking about an agreement that was made with the city that they are now reneging on. So I kind of feel like having a discussion about the merits of this particular social service provider is not what we're here to discuss this evening. It is simply about what the program was, what the points of agreement were. And I just want to see us focus on that. And to that end, this is really unacceptable, what's been presented to us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Leslie, Les, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. I hear you.
Welcome.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think this was an agreement that was made some years ago, and the city accepted the agreement, and we as a board accepted it. And this is what we expect, and this is what we want to see followed.
Thank you, Les. I'm going to go to Joe. I'm a little, Sarah, correct me. Did I hear HPD wants to rezone?
Yes, there would be a
I'm going to ask Joe, have we ever had something like that, Joe?
I want to come to that in 1 second, because that's something that the board learned about all of a day ago. First, we are not at all an anti-supportive housing, anti-social service, anti-homeless board. And I would like just the committee members to raise your hand if you are in support in general, not at this site, in general, of supportive housing and of social services in our district. So that is our committee. And I will tell you that our board is the same thing, because we have project after project come to us and they are almost to a project approved. So that's not our discussion. I have a discussion for either Sarah, Heiser, or Aaron. When you as a developer applied for this RFP, the RFP did not say it's a supportive housing RFP, nothing. It said it's an RFP with the range of incomes. It was very specific. And that's what it was. What in anybody's idea, if I apply for a supportive housing RFP and I put in a middle income response, how do you get chosen? How did this happen? So I just put that to Hudson first, because it was not the RFP that was issued, because we participated in writing it. Hudson, somebody?
Thank you, Joe. And members of the board.
Like a basic question, you know?
No, it's a fine question. I mean, we didn't choose ourselves. Truth be told, we put in a response. This was the first, we applied for both sites. And I believe the other site is the Douglaston site that is moving ahead of this one, which had a different income mix, actually had a different nonprofit partner on that one. And so this was a, collective idea that we had for both sites, and then they decided to split them, split awardees, but we did not pick ourselves. I mean, this was what we thought would be interesting. And I think it was in a context of a response for two sites. So cleaving it off and just having one, I think it does maybe feel a little uncontextual, but we put this forth and then it was up to the city to make the choice. I mean, we did what we thought would be an interesting suggestion here, and we were picked. But
so normally, though, if you put in an RFP response for a skating rink and you propose a theater, you don't get chosen. So that's what we find odd, and I want to say that to the broader community. It's a very odd thing here.
So I'd like HPD to respond. And I'd like
Yeah,
to keep responding, but I believe there was some supportive
Yes.
housing language in there, and I know you responded too. So like, I don't think we just like, decided, hey, let's be maverick and do that. So I mean, HPD should respond.
No, there was a list of HPD programs. There was nothing about saying it's a supportive housing RFP. I know that for a fact.
I'd love to turn it over to HPD because it was their decision. So
No, I understand the selection was. I'm asking from the developer's point of view. And I'd like to hear from HPD in a moment. Let me go to my next issue, please. So obviously we have been trying, the transparency part is a line of baloney when I want to say it. 3 meetings in 3 years, developers, sponsors, HPD should have found the time to meet with our community board more than 3 times in 3 years about a project of this scale. We're going to say that and we'll say it over and over because that's the truth. But the last piece that comes out of nowhere, and we've been trying to figure out a way to talk to everybody, and then can we come up with some sort of compromise? We haven't heard anything. Chris, I want to ask you a question. You're holding up a flyer. What is that?
Thank you. I'm so glad you asked, Joe. I received multiple emails from community leaders. This was an attachment that was sent from an email. I believe it was either from the Hudson Company or Housing Works. I can't recall right now. But it's titled Delirio, 806 9th Avenue, Supportive and Affordable Housing for the Hell's Kitchen Community. It announces the upcoming public meeting. There are bullet states times, a link to go to the Register of CB4 page, and the body of one of the emails, because it was the only email that I received that actually had a message, was it was asking a member of this community to speak on behalf of this project using the bullet points here. And this was sent out to advocates, I'm assuming, in their email list. In my days of political strategy, I would have donors in Hell's Kitchen. I would identify them. I would email them. I'd say, hey, you're a friend of our organization. We want you to go to this meeting and speak to this. This is disgusting. This is not how we operate.
So let me come to the new issue from yesterday. And that is, we have never, since the special zoning district was put together in 1973 and adopted, we have never rezoned a residential underlying zoning to commercial. In fact, we've done the opposite. We have spent decades removing commercial zones and manufacturing zones and rezoning them residential in our preservation area. This decision that was made totally in the dark with no transparency and no discussion in public for more than a 3-year period, when you, Sarah Pizer, say that you've gone through your environmental review, we are learning about this decision one day before the first public reveal of this, is unconscionable, and not by the developer, but by the city of New York. We have worked hand in glove on our special zoning district for close to 50 years. It's insane. That's unacceptable. You can do things through text. We do it all the time, but we normally come and have a developer, and most likely it's a private sector developer that comes and asks to work with us and figure out how to do something. I mean, you are dropping a commercial zone. You said with no information or background why that commercial zone would have no impact. Well, you're wrong, because the next developer that comes specifically is looking to extend a commercial zone. It affects adjacent properties. Someone who thinks that's not a big issue. I have heard that statement from multiple developers over decades, and you're just dead wrong. You just don't know. So that is something, and this new special permit for the bulk, and whatever you want to accomplish, come talk to us, figure out how to do it so it can get done, and a development can happen here that looks as much as like the development that was not promised, but that was committed to, signed by a deputy mayor and signed by a city council speaker. It's not a promise, folks, remember, from the public. These were documents as part of massive, massive upzonings. The Western Rail Yards went from an FAR of 3 to an FAR of like 9. And we took buildings that will be some of the tallest in the city. They're going to change our skyline. And in exchange, we got affordable housing crumbs. That's what we got. We got the best we could. And one of these is this MTA site, which we identified for multiple years prior to it coming to the Western Rail Yards. And I'm going to ask that the development team the sponsor, and certainly this current administration respect the fact that we've gone through a process and we need to get to another process now to figure out how to make something actually work here. And the response in this technical sort of flat presentation does not speak to that at all. And it's really, really disrespectful for a community that is engaged in details and thoughts to trying to make things work when we're in difficult trouble. So
Thank you, Joe.
I'll leave it for that for a moment, JD, and then come back.
Thank you, Joe. Sarah Mills, welcome. Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I will be brief. I just wanted to say and be on the record that I totally agree with my colleagues on the community board and their position on this project. It is so disappointing that these points of agreement are not being met. And I'm just looking forward to hear from my other neighbors and community members of the public. So thank you, JD.
Thank you, Sarah. Good comment. I believe Ahmed has joined us. Ahmed, welcome. Are you with us, Ahmed?
I am, and I apologize for not being on video. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ahmed, we can hear
Great.
you.
Hi, for folks who I have not met, my name is Ahmed Tigani. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Neighborhood Strategies, and I'm joined by several members of the HPD team, some of which are specifically working on this project. So I will try to respond to some of the questions raised, and members of the team who I know are also have panel access may jump in or add additional information. So first, I do want to say and recognize something. I've worked with CB4 in the past in different capacities, and I have found that this is a board that cares deeply about affordable housing. I have found that this is a board that cares about making sure that the city meets its obligation to its residents, to its citizens, and to make sure that we find places to create housing that addresses a wide range of needs. I agree with the sentiments that have been expressed by this board and before I've been involved in this conversation. This application before you is something that we want to continue talking to the board about. And there have been very good and important points that we'll have to continue talking to the board and the community about as well. The POA for the Western Rail Yard and the goal to reach 165 up to 165% AMI is something that we did take into consideration. I know, and I won't speak out of turn because I know there are members of the board and the community that were more deeply involved in the granular process of developing the RFP and the selection process. But when we looked at the application, a couple of things that I understand was part of that process. One, with regards to the sites being coupled together or designated individually, we looked at the ownership of the site, the underlying obstacles and conditions, and saw that these were two very complex sites. And at that point, based on our experience, having built hundreds of thousands of units of housing, having gone through a large number of RFPs in this administration and people who have stretched back and continue to be working with the city and could give us input, it made more sense from a practicality and from a practical point of view and ensuring that it gets done, that we went with two different experience designations to make this project viable. That was the opinion that we reached, and we still believe that is the right direction to go in, especially given the complexities we continue to see as we try to look at these projects. The question about the AMIs and the neighborhood and the AMI distribution, it's an issue that we want to continue working with the board. We know these are, this board needs a wide range of units. And while I can't speak to what the history has been in totality for CB4, the thoughtfulness of your affordable housing plans and your dialogue with the city is something that I do respect. I know the HPD does respect. We are faced, and we continue to overcome this citywide crisis around delivering affordable housing, especially after COVID has been further exacerbated. And it's not something that we are targeting for one particular neighborhood or the other. This is a 5-borough hunt to find as many places as we can to deal with an affordable housing crisis that in many cases is difficult for us to hit the lower and extremely low incomes. We think that there's still more to talk about with this project, with this board and with this community, but the approach and the desire to deliver these units, supportive housing units, to create permanent homes for a segment of the community that it's in many ways difficult from a financing and sourcing public land to be able to do that is a worthwhile project to pursue. And many people have correctly said that the project itself and the merits is not the issue. The argument and the pushback has to do with the history, and HPD would like to continue talking about ways that we can find elements of the project that fit with parts of the neighborhood's plan and the neighborhood's goals and visions. But we feel very strongly that given the need that we're trying to fulfill, and again, just want to emphasize, not something where it's targeting particular boroughs. We're trying to leverage all our assets, all our public land to deliver units for those who need it. And we would like to pursue this project here as well. But we know that we have to continue talking to the board about these questions and the issues that have come up.
Ahmed, I want to thank you for those comments. I just want to state one thing, which I know you're aware of. This board does not make decisions for the community. This board works with the community and arrives at a consensus with the community. So I think we do welcome your comments about continuing. I think Bob Benfato, a member of the board, had a question. Bob, are you there?
Yeah, it was more a comment. I was gonna let it go, but it came up a second time. What Chris got is actually standard all throughout the city at community board levels. You do get advocacy from groups. Most of the time you get it on liquor license cases. You have a guy who owns places in multiple areas and they call them their community lists. We did get it from time to time. I was district manager at CB4 for over 8 years. So it's not uncommon at all. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it. I know people hate it, but it is what it is at the level. And I just wanted to second Joe. I found the change in the zoning to be perplexing, just put it mildly. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Mildly. I want to thank the committee. I'm sure the committee will have comments later on. I do want to go to the public. I just want to say on my part, I want to echo Paul Devlin's concerns about cherry picking from the points of agreement. And I have to say, public community outreach is not going to the borough president. It's not going to a block association and saying, this is what we're doing. Public outreach should be a two-way street. And let's hope we can get some of that two-way street going if we continue discussing, as Ahmed has said. I'm going to go to the public, and I'm going to call on Leslie Murphy first. I think she is. I'm going to call on Lowell. Lowell, do you have any, as our chair, any other comments?
Lowell? I want to thank Paul for picking up the one point that I had on my list that I missed about the cherry picking. But otherwise, I think I've shared the board's point of view on this, that this is not what we made a deal for, not what we're expecting, and not what something that we can support in its current form.
Thank you, Lowell. Leslie Murphy, are you here? Leslie is a member of the community board. She's an officer of the board, and she also lives on 54th Street. Leslie, I'm going to call on you first.
Thank you, JD. Very kind of you. I agree with everything that committee members said. And but I'm not here as a CB4 member. Right now, I'm here as a representative of our block association, which is 55th Street, and as a representative for our buildings tenant committee. And my comments are not for the developer. It's pretty much for the city. And Mr. Chigani, you really struck a chord with me because you talked about need. And I want to speak to the housing you are taking away, because this administration has ignored, I believe, the needs of the working and middle class time and time again. And I think specifically in our neighborhood. And I think that is a very important piece of the puzzle to keep a neighborhood vibrant that I feel that is being ignored. I've been a resident of Hell's Kitchen for over 17 years, and I moved in as a young single girl scrapping pennies, and my place literally I could only afford, it had no kitchen. And I know that's probably illegal, but it didn't have a kitchen, but I moved in anyway because I took what I could get. And ever since then, I've been really deeply involved in representing our apartments residents on our building board here. And in that capacity, I have been really closely acquainted with building finances, and it's not a pretty picture. Every year, the city raises our real estate taxes, and every year more people are forced out because they cannot afford these increases. These are working class and retired people that are not surviving the rising cost of living. And they're being forced out of this neighborhood that they love, and they do feel that the city has forsaken them. And I think particularly in Hell's Kitchen over these few years. And that is why I believe we were looking forward to this site, as it has been long committed to working class and moderate income units. I'm also, JD, if you allow me, I'm also on the education committee for this community board. And you're probably thinking, what does that have to do with anything, right? But you may or may not know this. Elementary schools in our city are pretty good. You get to junior high, it's hit or miss, and high school is pretty tough. So the reputation, except for a few schools, it's not flattering. Why does that matter in this discussion? Because what is happening, as I'm on this committee and I have a young child in school, is because working and middle class families grow their families, they find city living unaffordable, and then they're the ones getting squeezed out, and they're not going to the junior highs, they're not going to the high schools. So this is not just detrimentally affect the neighborhood economically, but it has a huge impact on public education. So just to your decision to change these AMI bans, just think of it. You're canceling a carefully constructed agreement. This is not made in a vacuum. As commendable and altruistic as your current plan is, it's terrifically short-sighted. This is purely an economic equation. And you're doing it over and over again. You're creating very, very, very high and very, very, very low housing. And it's not a sustainable model. So I just want to end, if you change the points of agreement for this MTA site from moderate income bands that were agreed upon, it's a clear message to the residents of Hell's Kitchen that you really don't value us in our working class, and you don't value our families, and it's families in whatever shape or form that comes in. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Christine Gorman, president of West 55th Street. Christine, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, JD. As JD said, my name is Christine Gorman. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, since I worked professionally as a journalist. I was one of the first journalists nationally to write about HIV/AIDS, and my work helped to reduce the stigma of HIV/AIDS across the country. I lost a number of good friends to AIDS in the 80s and 90s. I went in hospitals. I showed my colleagues and other friends that it was okay to go to hospitals and be with friends and say goodbye. My partner and I'm a lesbian. My partner and I have lived in Hell's Kitchen on West 55th Street for over 25 years. I've been a longtime volunteer with the West Side Federation for Senior and Supportive Housing. I'm an active volunteer with refugees with my church. And we are currently supporting and helping 2 and probably soon 3 Afghan families to become independent here in the US after the fall of their government in Afghanistan. And so this is just to give you, a little flavor of the kind of, I'm nobody special. I represent a lot of the progressive element in Hell's Kitchen. And I actually am also old enough that I remember the fights over the MTA site when we were talking about the issue was the height. And you mentioned in the Western Rail Yards agreement many of us in the community were quite concerned about allowing that variance in the mid block. And I remember having a huge fight with JD Nolan. I don't know if you remember it, JD. We were kind of yelling at each other. But you finally convinced me, because you said we could go up in the height because we desperately needed the moderate to middle income housing, because people even then were being priced out of the neighborhood. And so, as has been mentioned, the whole community got together, community leaders got together. Nobody got everything they wanted, but we all came to an agreement, and we gave up on the height issue in order to get more moderate to middle income housing. And I also, along with Paul, was stunned at the idea that you would pick out the one thing in the Western Rail Yards agreement about the height and say, well, this is okay because, no. That compromise was so we could get more moderate to middle income housing. And I'm just stunned. I shouldn't be, but I'm truly stunned at how you can expect anyone to trust anything that is ever agreed on now with what, Ahmed, you were talking, and I applaud you for talking about working with the community, but why should we trust anything that's said if the agreement written in ink can just be torn up and thrown out? I personally have experience helping someone on West 55th Street who became homeless, was evicted because she just finally couldn't afford the rent anymore. And I helped her get into the homeless shelter system in New York City. I'm glad to say that she's now in, a permanent housing situation, not too far from us. But it was a mess and it was awful. And we know that there is a homelessness crisis. There is also a crisis for working class and middle class folks. And the people of Hell's Kitchen have been dealing with this. Please work with us. Don't ignore us. And please don't make an agreement that you're not going to abide by. It's an issue of trust. It really is. And and the zoning thing, I can't tell you how stunned I am. The Clinton Special District, we know the developers are trying to chip away at the special district, and you're giving them the tools to do it. You may not see it, but that's only because you haven't had the experience that we've had over the years of how every little, seemingly neutral change gets abused by folks who are greedy and want to take the land. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I think we were yelling at each other in French, no? It's my
Yes,
recollection.
mais bien sûr, as
Hey,
my mom is originally from France.
Okay. Thank you, Christine. I'm going to go to Elka Fears, who also represents a block association, and then to Martin, who is also with us. Elka, are you with us? President of 4748th Street Block Association.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
Elka.
Good, okay. Hi, I'm Elka Fears. I'm president of the West 4748th Street Block Association and a resident of Hell's Kitchen for almost 40 years, probably longer than many of you were born or old. So we had a lot of meetings about this topic, about the MTA site over a decade and more. I was at most of those meetings representing my block association and me as a resident. And a lot of back and forth, a lot of shouting, a lot of agreement, but we came to the consensus that what the neighborhood was sorely lacking was moderate and middle income housing. And HPD listened to us at that time, and they agreed, and they said they'd recommend moderate and middle income housing. And they did that until they didn't a few years ago. And, you know, the need for moderate and middle income housing that many years ago hasn't changed. It's probably even more acute today. The Clinton Hell's Kitchen neighborhood is proud of our inclusionary housing history, as was brought up before. I mean, we say yes to everything as long as you come to us and work with us. You know, everyone said there's a need for the low supportive. I don't hear anyone in the administration say there is a need for moderate and middle income housing, and you've just heard some reasons why there is. We need the incomes of moderate and middle really as sustainability for our community, for services, etc. So I'm not saying this very well, but we want HPD to stand by the agreement that was made for 806 9th Avenue, an agreement that was made with Community Board 4, an agreement that was made with the community. And then regarding zoning, I mean, it's really kind of laughable if it wasn't so scary. You might remember part of the zoning for the Clinton zoning text is to preserve and strengthen the residential character of the community. And the suggestion for a zoning text change is setting a bad precedent. And it's just a blatant attempt to start nibbling away at our Clinton Special District Preservation zoning and open it up to developers. This has always been at our doorstep. This is not the first attempt, I don't think, but I think we've all been nervous about this. And I sure hope this gets turned down. We really can't allow these zoning changes. And as much as the presentation, you know, I agree with Dolores. It's terrific for what you all want to do, but this is the wrong place to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Elka. Before we go to the public, we're going to have one more speaker. Martin, are you with us, Martin? I know you live right there. I see you. Martin, can you hear?
I can. Can you hear me? No?
Not well.
Me?
Not well.
You're kind of choppy.
Oh, in any case, I'd like to cede my spot to Greg Rose, proud son of 55th Street, about some work he and I did just before the pandemic.
Who is he?
Greg Rose, we brought him over, JD. He should be on shortly.
Hi, can you?
Okay.
Sorry, the screen went away for a second. Thank you, Martin. I just, you know, when this application or proposal first came up, you know, Martin and I got together and formed Neighbors for Hell's Kitchen because we were very concerned about what was taking place. And as someone who had a great time growing up just around the block from where this was taking place, you know, I saw, you know, the lights go up every winter. I knew all my neighbors, and, you know, this was, you know, someone who then started working in politics and got to know the land use process, saw this for what it was. And that was, you know, sort of a way of circumventing the community. And as many people have pointed out here. So when we started hearing about this, we put together a report and found that there are really only 14,616 affordable housing units in the immediate area. And just 366 of them are from moderate incomes. And that's about 100% AMI. So that's, you know, people who are firefighters, NYPD officers, you know, or people who work on Broadway, just around the corner. You know, they can't afford to live here. You know, and the average family size for Community Board 4 is about 1.7. But, you know, a lot of those are, you know, are only one bedrooms out of the affordable housing units are actually coming online. So I don't want to get into too much of the weeds, but in the presentation, they admitted that just 56 units will either be 2 or 3 bedrooms, and 2 of them will be 3. So to put in context, I'm an only child and I grew up in a 2-bedroom, and I didn't realize, how, small that was until I went away to college. And, it was great. We loved it, but you still need bigger places for families, and families who want to grow up in Hell's Kitchen and have the great opportunities that I did. And this plan just does not allow that to happen. So I know a lot of people who are on this board because I've seen them around. I've seen them at restaurants. I've, seen them walking their dogs. And, that's a community that we want to make sure other people like me have the opportunity to live in. And this does not allow for it. I just want to leave, when Joe put up those, the frame up about where all those supportive housing units are in the area, I was proud to see that. I thought that, and honestly, for most of the part, if you don't know they're there growing up, you wouldn't know they were there.
Right.
I think that's the point. I went to Beacon, when it was on 56th Street, and I was able to walk there. It was fine. Not a problem, no crime, whatever. Even when I went downtown to 14th Street for middle school, I was able to do that by myself. I got on the subway, it was fine. I can't say that that's the case now. I can't say that, it's okay. And that's mainly because the city has not given the community the resources that it needs to make sure the community has stayed safe, particularly in the last year and a half. So it's not just that we don't want, we don't know, I should say, that it's possible to build supportive housing and people for who need it. But, the reason why we're concerned about this particular project is because, one, like I said before, we don't know if people, people like me would be able to, or, my kids would be able to grow up in Hell's Kitchen now. And also because we haven't been getting the resources that we need when more families who need these supportive housing were given the resources that they need to, get their lives back on track. And we want them to get their lives back on track, but that just isn't happening right now. So not only are we concerned about the land use changes, but we don't know how this is going to operate. And, that's our main concern. And I see a lot of people nodding their heads. I want to thank the board for giving me this time, Martin, because I know you've all been a lot longer on this board for than I have. And I do appreciate your time and frankly, your sacrifices, because you're on these, meetings a lot longer than I am. So with that, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gregory. I want to go to the public. It's been very patient waiting to speak. I'm going to ask Janine to bring like 3 names forward, one at a time. Janine, can you help me out here?
Yeah, I'll be bringing Eric. I'll bring Eric, Valerie, and Liz.
Okay, great. Welcome you all, and please introduce yourself. So,
excuse me, JD. Eric. Excuse me, JD, Janine. Is it possible for me to maybe try to respond or provide some information related with the rezoning and the land use actions questions?
I think we want to hear from the public first. We can come back to that, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, Felipe, absolutely. We can come back to it, but people have been waiting very patient, and it's their
Let me know when you're ready.
Perfect. Thank you, Felipe. Eric, welcome.
Yes. Thank you so much for opening up this opportunity for me to speak to you all. And I'm here to speak in favor of the development of Valerio. I myself am a long-term survivor living with symptoms of HIV since 1981. I have experienced a lot of illnesses of aging because of my advanced HIV disease. I have heart disease, I've had cancer, I've had hip replacements, I've had 8 vein surgeries on collapsing veins in my legs, on and on and on. And I'm only 67 years old. And I am so much like so many other long-term survivors living in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood. Initially, there was when the presentation began, there was a discussion about how Hell's Kitchen has the highest concentration of people living with HIV of the entire city. More than 50% of people living with HIV in the city are over 50 years old. And there are many, many, not only gay men living with HIV in the Hell's Kitchen areas, but many families that are impacted, with some with both the father and mother living with HIV, with all of these comorbidities that are making their lives more and more challenging every day. And part of the rationale behind the city modifying this proposal to include long-term survivor residential supportive housing units is because there's so many people living with HIV, long-term survivors in the neighborhood who need these levels of advanced services, and there are just none available at an affordable level in that neighborhood. So, you know, we're sympathetic to everything that you're saying about, you know, the need for your family and people who look like you to be able to have affordable housing. But people living with HIV are people in the community that have needs also. And as this project has brought forward, the project was modified to meet some of those people's needs. Some of these, you know, the majority of these people are already living in your neighborhood and are in danger of having to leave the neighborhood because they need supportive services that they can't find there and can't afford. There's also a lot of people in the community who have been on private disability programs from higher income jobs who are now turning 65, losing those disability programs and having to live on Social Security and can't afford their you know, apartments that were, you know, gained when they were working or when they had these higher income long-term disability programs, and they're being forced to you know, leave the neighborhood too. So, you know, I'm just urging you to realize that, you know, there are people living amongst you in dire need as well. And this program, you know, will allow those people to continue to be part of the community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I heard a clang. Was that, are we timing here? No, I guess not. But thank you, Eric, for those comments. Janine, who's next?
Valerie and Liz.
Valerie, welcome.
Hi, my name is Valerie Reyes Jimenez, and I'm here to speak in favor of the Lirio and also to, you know, help move the project along. In full transparency, I live 3 blocks outside of the district right now, but I do almost all of my business in Hell's Kitchen. Everything I do is in pretty much Hell's Kitchen. And I am also a long-term survivor of HIV. I have been HIV positive for 40 years. I am currently gainfully employed. My employer is Housing Works. I will say that I came to Housing Works in 1990 as a homeless person who was going through a lot of trouble at the time, who had 2 young children. And I will say that when I got there, all I wanted was an apartment. I didn't want anything else, but I got so much more. I got case management, I got healthcare, I got a whole lot more than I bargained for, right? But the thing was that I was able to raise my children after the death of my husband. And I now have 2 children who are productive members of the society. My daughter is a teacher for New York City. My son is a merchant marine. And I couldn't have done any of those things without the people that I met and the people that supported me and helped me and got me an apartment and helped me through all that. I no longer live with any, you know, with any of the Housing Works apartments. I was fortunate to actually get an apartment through the lottery process, which to me was like hitting the lotto. Because as a native New Yorker, I could no longer afford to live in the city that I was born and raised in. My son made a decision to leave the city because he could not survive as a single male by himself, you know, so he no longer lives in the state. And, you know, it's a struggle to be middle class, but can you imagine what it's like to not even be listed as a class, to be lower than, you know, people look down on you. And, you know, right now, the homeless population in New York City, 89% are people of color. We're talking about Black and Hispanics alone, 89%. You can look on the Coalition for Homeless website. They have a lot of statistics. They have a lot of information on there, you know, but as a native New Yorker, you know, we know that, you know, when we go back to like the Lenapes, all the way down, nothing in New York City comes without a history, you know, and 20 years of, you know, going back and forth with what's been happening. I'm naive to a lot of it. I don't know the politics, the ins and outs of what's happened. I do work for Housing Works, but I don't work in the housing development area. I'm in advocacy. I'm an advocate. I advocate for people who are homeless, who are HIV positive. And that's pretty much what I'm doing here today, not just as a person living with the virus, but also as a person who was formerly homeless and who is now, you know, working and doing the best to reach like middle class. Middle class to me is like a lifelong goal. If I hit middle class in this lifetime, then you know what? That's a check off my bucket list, you know? And that's just me. And the people that I work with are people who sleep on the streets, you know, and I know what Hell's Kitchen looks like. I'm here every single day. And I know what's happened on the Upper West Side, you know, with the hotels and all of that. And, you know, this is my community. New York City is my community. Hell's Kitchen is my community. The Upper West Side is my community. Hell, I hail from the Lower East Side. I know that's my community too, you know? So I'm just, I can just go on and on. I'm not going to do that, but I just want to thank you for allowing us to be here, to speak to you, to listen to, you know, the concerns of the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Valerie, and congratulations for raising two wonderful kids.
Hey.
Deserve congratulations for that.
I'm even donning my Hell's Kitchen tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Valerie. Liz, are you with us?
Yeah,
Okay.
hi. I'm not homeless, but I'm in
Hi.
Liz's apartment. There's a group of us here. Richard Marins is here. We're at 48th Street. And I just have to say, I have just a couple of things and one question. So first of all, I think as so many people have said so far, no one is saying that this is not a good project. It's just not right for this neighborhood. We are not a not in my backyard kind of neighborhood. We're just a not always in our backyard kind of neighborhood. I too have raised two wonderful boys. Both have decided to go into education to give back to the community. Neither one who could afford to live in this neighborhood where they grew up. And the whole point of this project was supposed to be to allow for people like my children who want to teach, but will never make a lot of money, to actually still be able to stay in the neighborhood that they grew up in and to be able to give back to the community. So that's the thing I'm going to say. The other thing, and my question is, because it seems to me that after all this time and all this work that the community board has put into negotiating with the city, and the city not being a truthful or reliable partner, what is it that we can now do to fight this? Because it doesn't seem like talking and trying to negotiate is working. So what, as we as other citizens, how can we mobilize to try and make sure that we get what was promised to this neighborhood? Because I also, at the end of our block, is another site that I believe the city is also trying to renege on in terms of what was promised for the giant giveaway of the soulless Hudson Yards. So we just want to be able to do something. So that's my question. And if it can be answered tonight, that would be great. And thank you so much.
You're doing, Liz, you're doing exactly what has to be done by joining the conversation and speaking up. Thank you, Liz.
All right. Well, we want boots on the ground
Janine?
too. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. Janine, we have 3 more speakers coming up.
Richard, Mark, and Betty.
I'm sorry, Janine, I didn't hear. Could you repeat that?
Sure. Richard, Mark, and Betty Herman.
Okay, Richard, Mark, and Betty. Richard, are you there? I don't know which Richard this is, but welcome.
Richard Marins.
Richard Marins?
I can't. You got to turn yours off. Can you hear me? No.
Yes, Richard,
Yes.
welcome.
Whoops, that's not good. Hello?
We hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
It's not working.
It's working, Richard. You want to come back?
At any rate, thank you. Thank you to the board members for their excellent work in this matter. I just want to say that I believe this is a cynical and callous effort on the part of the politicians on the citywide basis, the mayor, and our local elected officials who have really stabbed us in the back. This is, as has been said over and over, this has been worked on for many, many years. And all of us who have worked on it have been here for many, many years, through the rough times, through the really difficult fights with the drug dealers and prostitutes, and we know what we need to make this neighborhood work. This is also a community that will compromise. And we all feel for the people in need and the people that this was meant to address. And we feel that we can still accomplish meeting their needs and meeting the community's needs. But it is the politicians and the people who stand to benefit from this development who are trying to drive a wedge between the people of this community and obtain something that is completely wrong and is just a cynical effort to contravene what was promised to this neighborhood. I do want to emphasize what Liz and Lori were saying before, which this is not the only place where the city and our local politicians are stabbing us in the back. It's not just 54th Street, it's 48th Street as well. They're reneging on every deal that they made with us. We know what this neighborhood needs to continue and be strong, and this city politicians are completely overriding this community. This is not negotiation, this is a steamroll. And they're trying to take our community away, and we really, really need to fight. But we can also still work with our neighbors, work with the people here, work with the population that this project is supposed to address. We can make a deal, we can make this work, but it's got to have some respect for this neighborhood, and there's been none shown, not by the city and not by our local politicians either. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mark, you're up next. I don't know your last name. Mark, are you with us?
Hi, JD. Mark Hirschfeld. I know a couple of you over the years. I live in an HDFC on the south side of 53rd Street between 8th and 9th Avenue. I moved into this building over 49 years ago, back when it was under the private landlord. I've seen lots of changes go on over the years. I've been to a number of community board meetings, and I have followed this project over the past, whatever, decade and a half, 2 decades that I've been aware of it, and have been supportive of all the good work that the community board has done in making this a realistic project. We're trying to make this a realistic project for the community. So I want to support all that you guys have said regarding the need for the mixed income housing that it was originally supposed to be. The one other point I'd like to emphasize, since I actually live on a block that is going to have rezoning happen across the street, the presenters or proponents of this project kind of said the zoning doesn't mean much. Well, there are 8 buildings on the north side of 53rd Street, wrapping around the corner, that are small apartment buildings that will be rezoned. And to say that, oh, the changing won't mean anything to those buildings and the private landlords that own some of those buildings, there's one word that sums it up: nonsense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, for that one word summation. That was interesting. Betty, there is a Betty who would like to speak. I'm sorry, I don't have your last name. Okay, no Betty. Janine, who's
that was Betty Herman. She hasn't been transitioned over, JD.
No.
Okay.
Betty needs to unmute.
Yeah. Welcome, Betty.
Unmute, Betty. Hit unmute. You're muted.
Can you hear us, Betty? I guess.
Still muted.
Can you unmute, Betty? Okay. Janine, can we come back to Betty if she unmutes?
Sure, the next person is John Smallwood and then Jacob Tidwell.
And we have Katie Savage too, also.
And Katie. Okay, John Smallwood, welcome.
Welcome. I apologize. I'm not sure why the video is not working, but my name is John Smallwood, and I have two items I just wanted to cover. I live across the street from the project, so I know there's a lot of people have spoken about the AMIs and the supportive housing, but I wanted to ask some questions or make some comments on the zoning. One is, first of all, the height that the developer is proposing is not as of right, but is a special permit. And so I just want to make sure we should all talk about that in that context. The rendering that they shared with us appeared to show something built above that 95-foot height. So if they could just talk about that or share that rendering with us. I guess for me, it's just they're giving us a project as a thrift store, talking about wrapping around commercial on a residential street, office space on a second floor. None of it is contextual with this neighborhood. And so, before they go through the ULURP process, we would definitely want to understand, what is the purpose of that? Why are they asking to make all these changes to the neighborhood to benefit their project? And also just on outreach, there was no outreach to any neighbors that I know of, that I'm aware of. Martin lives next door to me. We've never been approached by Hudson companies saying, hey guys, what do you think? Is there anything, you have any concerns about the neighborhood? And then the third thing is, I just want to go back a question that Joe asked. I think, I should also start off by saying I do a lot of work with HPD, just full disclosure. But, Joe brought up a question of the developer, why did they, how did we get to this supportive housing? My understanding is that the developer is the one that proposed this, not HPD. So I don't know if the developer wants to speak to that. I think to make their financing, that was my understanding. So, I think we've been, picking on the city and HPD, but I feel like this came from the developer. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Jacob Tidwell, welcome, Jacob.
Hi, thank you CB4 for holding the meeting. I'm a resident on West 54th Street. I live between 8th and 7th Avenue in CB5. I have lived in CB4 for 3+ years in the past. I've lived in New York City in the Hell's Kitchen area for about 11 years. I am speaking in support of this project. It has its flaws, but overall, I think we are in dire need of housing. And while I think the upzoning is an issue, I think this is one project, and I suggest that my neighbors focus on building. And sorry if I'm cutting out. This is a small building, and we've got more people to house. We have a lot of people to house. I also encourage my neighbors who are so focused on the income level of our new neighbors to maybe redirect their energy into getting affordable grocery stores back in the neighborhood, getting the affordable businesses and local businesses back in the neighborhood. Specifically, I'm going to call out 52nd Street Styles, which did not come back. We can all support that project because that is the closest one in the neighborhood. Again, I just want to show my support for this project. And I also have personal experience with Housing Works. I've had a great experience with Housing Works since 2012. To date, they are still my provider. Yeah, so I see no issue with the Housing Works project, which I understand a lot of people on West 54th Street are upset by. Again, thank you for your time. Hello, community members. Thanks for joining this meeting.
Thank you, Jacob. And let's bring back Styles. Absolutely. Katie Savage, welcome. Katie, are you with us?
Yes. Hi, my name is Katie Savage. I live on West 51st Street, and I've been a resident of Hell's Kitchen for 16 years. I came here right out of high school for college, lived in Chelsea for a year, and I've been in Hell's Kitchen since then. Unfortunately, that entire time, I have been rent poor. despite working in high-end women's fashion and even making a low six-figure salary, I have been rent poor. I remember the day that one paycheck finally covered my rent, and then my rent went up. I've never qualified for any type of affordable housing, and I'm also rent poor. So what am I supposed to do? There's, you know, so much affordable housing and low-income affordable housing in this neighborhood. Like others have said, I didn't even know it existed, honestly. I did not realize until everything with the pandemic shifted that Hell's Kitchen has some of the highest quantities of supportive housing in all of New York City. So, you know, it's not that we don't have these, it's that we have so many people that can't afford to stay here. I run a volunteer community cleanup group, and, you know, I give back to the neighborhood, but if my rent goes up and I don't know how I can afford to stay here, how do we have people that do so much for the community, but then get screwed over because something that we were supposed to get just got changed? And that really doesn't feel fair that, you know, you're trying to give more middle income affordable housing, which, you know, someone earlier said was a very, very, very low percentage of what we currently have. You need to have that mix. You know, so many people can't really afford to live in this neighborhood, and it's such a special community. It's not unlike any other area in Midtown. It has a neighborhood feel, like, you know, people on the street, and there are so many people that want to be part of this community, but they can't because they have to live with roommates, or my cat is my only roommate, and unfortunately he doesn't qualify to get me a lower AMI. I wish he did, because then maybe I could afford to live in one of these units, maybe. You know, that's really it. I just wish that, you know, we had options for everybody, and it's not like we don't want supportive housing. It's the city changed their agreement, and that's really not fair to anybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you for all the work you do cleaning up the neighborhood. Shout out to Katie. Janine, do we have another 3 speakers?
Yes, next is John Chalice, Aisha Jukaku, and Kathleen Tree.
Thank you. And who's the second speaker? I'm sorry, I missed it.
No problem. Aisha?
Aisha, great. Thank you. John, welcome.
Thank you, JD. I'm going to speak to encourage the board and the committee to hold New York City and the developers to account for the original project. I'd just like to remind the city and the developer that the whole point of the community board system is to make sure that there's deep community input on projects precisely like this. And that this community board, if not others, does a fantastic job making sure that community input from people who live here, work here, have grown up here, is taken into account and thinking about these things. That was done in this case. And to discover that 20 years later, the city decided, in the absence of any clear change in need on the ground for middle income housing, low and moderate income housing, to unilaterally cancel an agreement is frankly astonishing. That they did it secretively is disappointing and disingenuous, among other things. I mean, you don't usually see that sort of political behavior in first world countries, but among other things, this sets a terrible precedent. And if the board doesn't say no to this, then what's next? I mean, as somebody else pointed out, when can you trust the city? And I just asked HPD, what if a developer did this to you? What if somebody in developing Hudson Yards added an extra 10 floors to one of their buildings, saying that they just decided that that's okay? I mean, you absolutely wouldn't go along with it. And I can't imagine what you think with trying to be on the other side of that argument. So thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, John. Aisha, welcome.
Hello. Hi. My name is
welcome,
Aisha Jukaku. I've been a resident of Hell's Kitchen for the last 11 years. My husband and I have been living here for quite some time. We are technically transplants, but love New York City, and have been here basically since after college. I just had a baby, and we plan on raising our children here in this neighborhood. And I've joined late, so I do have a few points. I apologize if I'm being repetitive. So I think, of course, that we should build housing for middle class and working class families. And I don't think that's an either or overall. There is an urgent need to provide housing to the homeless in our city. And everyone seems to be saying they're not NIMBY, but all of the opposition sounded quite NIMBY-ish. Though, of course, I don't want to accuse our neighbors of not being supportive of affordable housing. Some of our neighbors against this project want to keep the character of the neighborhood, it seems. And I'm sorry I joined late, and I'm not that well versed in the ongoing argument, but it sounds like that means that they want buildings to stay low rise. And I would ask the question that, isn't that what's causing the San Francisco housing crisis? That they don't want to rezone their neighborhoods and that nobody can afford to live there. I, of course, love that we have low rise housing, low rise buildings in this neighborhood. But if that's a part of the problem of not having affordable housing here, that's a sacrifice we should be willing to make as a community on a measured basis. That's kind of an aside. For this project, one building for the unhoused is not going to change the character of the neighborhood. And it won't mean that our community and businesses can't survive or thrive. And, we just need to have the will to solve our homelessness crisis. And in the best city in the country, in the world, we should be leading the fight. And the best neighborhood, of course, in Hell's Kitchen.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Aisha.
much.
Yes, the best neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Aisha. Welcome, Kathleen. Kathleen Treat, are you with us, Kathleen?
She needs
She's
to
not brought up.
unmute.
Kathleen,
She needs to unmute.
Yeah,
How's
unmute.
that? We hear you.
Yes.
First, I want to thank you all for holding this meeting. We have the best community board in Manhattan. This is a very complicated issue. It's complex. There's so much going on in it. There's no question that Housing Works does absolutely fabulous work. Zoning is an entirely different issue. And I think we're going to need more open meetings like this to educate all of us. Thanks again.
thank you, Kathleen. Best board in the city, I think, not just Manhattan. Anyway, I'm sorry, Janine.
It includes Staten Island.
Janine, who's next?
Next is Gu Yu Ji.
Welcome. We can't hear you. Okay.
I
we've
think I'm
lost you.
back.
There you go.
There
We
you
can
are.
hear you.
Welcome.
So we are a new family. Like my husband and I just moved into this community, and we really love, like our new life here. But what I want to say is, I'm not really anti the housing project. That's my. I want to make that clear. But the thing is, as a young couple just moving to this community, I'm not feeling safe. Sometimes, like at night, but which I don't think what was used to be. And I just want to say, like, we welcome everyone to be in this community, but as a young couple, we want to see more people like us, like middle class, like middle income class, and like teachers, like who really want to be in the community and has family here, can make their dream come true and can all join us. Thank you. That's what I just want to say. But thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Thank you very much. Janine, 3 more speakers do we have?
Oh, there's no one else with their hands up except for Dolores and Joe.
Okay, thank all members of the public who have spoken and spoken well. It's certainly very important. Let's go back. I think Dolores was up and then Joe.
Before we go there.
And I don't want to forget Felipe. I'm not going to forget Felipe also wanted to address some issues.
And yeah, thank you. Okay.
I have a question. Aaron? Would you be able to tell us who you are in the organization of Hudson? Your role?
Yeah, I'm a managing principal of the Hudson Companies, and I run affordable housing development, among other things.
I know we're on Zoom, but I wanted to point out that I have felt that you and your colleague have been disinterested in the community comments. And I'm pointing that out because this is an extremely important project. It is land that is available for affordable housing that this community fights for. You're presenting an incredibly wonderful project, but you don't seem to be listening very carefully to the concerns that this community has that it doesn't fit here. And I'm calling you out on it because that's what it seems like to me on the video. And I'm concerned about that because, again, I have no way of knowing this, but this seems like a show that HPD and Hudson are putting on because this is a done deal. And that's not calling out you on that, that's calling out our electeds. Our electeds are not in this room. They're not speaking up and supporting the community for what we fought for. Kudos on putting together a great project. But again, this seems like there's a show being put on to say we've had public process, but it doesn't feel like public process.
May I also add that I did not appreciate laughing during public testimony. We watched that. You're live on camera.
I'm going to go to Joe and Felipe. I haven't
Wait,
forgotten.
wait. I'm sorry, JD. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm not
Aaron,
gonna-
I hear you. There's kind of an echo. There's kind of an echo, Aaron.
How about
Go ahead.
now? Is that better?
A little better, yeah.
Mr. Rubin, I'm sorry if you feel that way. I take this very seriously. And I'm sitting here with our consultant, and we have been talking about things and reacting to things and doing things in real time here to try and decide how we should react and where we should react. It's been a long meeting. I appreciate the work that the board has done because we are all giving up our evenings here. But yes, in one moment I had to get up to go to the restroom, to be honest with you. But otherwise, this is very important to me. I wish we had more of them. Truth be told, we've been somewhat prohibited from having these meetings, which is why we're here tonight. So I take not from CB4. I won't say that.
Right. Not by us.
Wait, hold on,
Aaron. Not saying that. What I'm saying is I take the engagement of the community board very seriously, as does Hudson, as does Housing Works. And I really wish we were I wish this was the 20th meeting we were having tonight.
Aaron,
I'm
thank
sad that
you.
it's not, but I would like to say that I'm sorry you've taken it that way, but trust me, I've been writing down notes for the last 2.5 hours. I was actually standing and applauding for Aisha's testimony. I've listened to you, Mr. LeBron, with your testimony. I'd be happy to respond to it. I've listened to every single member here. I take it very seriously. This company takes it seriously. I'm sorry if there was a moment where you thought I laughed, but this is of the utmost importance that we engage here and have this kind of dialogue.
Thank you, Aaron. Just one clarification. Did you say you had been restrained from speaking to the board?
We've been discouraged from sleeping. Sorry. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm just tired. My young children woke me up very early this morning.
I'm confused. The board is a city agency. Who discouraged you to speak to a city agency?
I think the issue is that we wish we had been able to speak to you more often during the pandemic. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen. And I'll leave it at that. And what I'm trying to say is it's very important that we have these conversations. We've wanted to have more of them. I'm sorry that hasn't happened. It hasn't really been the development team's choice to do that. And in the spirit of being called out for not taking it seriously, I take it very seriously because we've been dying to be here. and we've been dying to meet with you and engage with you for the last 19 months plus. And thankfully, have been able to do that more in September than in the previous 19 months. So
Thank you, Aaron.
I appreciate the response, Aaron. I just wanted you to know how it seemed. And again, we're on Zoom. And that matters because you had over 90 people from the public that were here. And so that's what came across. And I wanted to make sure you were aware of that. Thank you.
JD, I apologize.
JD, if I may, I want to jump in here for a second.
Yes, Lowell.
For
Yeah,
19
welcome, Lowell.
I have been chair of this board since January of 2020, and not once has anyone from Hudson reached out to me or the board in those 19 since I became chair. So if you wanted to speak to us, my email is public, my phone number is public, the board's office number is public. The opportunity was there. We were begging our elected officials to meet with us about this and to try and put us together with the right people. No one approached us.
And I want to defer to Felipe, but I do want to call this out clearly. It is clear that the mayoral administration and HPD discouraged the developer and the sponsor not to talk to the community board. That's what it is. Let's just say it and get past it, because now we're past that. And let's say jointly that we cannot do this anymore. If you as developers want to do this project, you must engage with us regularly. We can figure out a way to make something work. Can we go
Thanks,
to Felipe,
Joe.
who was waiting? And then
Yes,
come back to me.
Felipe, thank you. Thank you for being patient, Felipe. You wanted to clarify some of the zoning?
Yeah, thank you, JD. Thank you, Joe. First of all, again, as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, thank you for hosting us. It's been a very, very, very good meeting, very instrumental for us to hear from you guys, from the community, for the residents. You're taking on the project, and for that, we really appreciate your time and dedication. I just wanna clarify a little bit the land use actions. I think specifically, correct me if I'm probably misheard, but special attention has been placed on the rezoning, the proposed rezoning for the project. When putting together the land use actions, we work closely with DCP on reviewing the proposed land use actions. When drafting them, we were very careful to keep the preservation area as not touch it very much, and probably keep it as close as it is right now. We were very careful on that. With the rezoning, as Sarah mentioned during the presentation, very clearly, what the rezoning is going to do basically is to bring the MTA building, the local precinct, and other building to be zoning compliance. We're not mapping MIH. We're not changing the residential FAR. There was a question, I believe, about what would happen to those private buildings that are going to be affected by the rezoning area, right? Based on our study with DCP, we don't anticipate much that those buildings will not be much affected by the rezoning. We are just bringing we are increasing the commercial FAR to bring those buildings, as I mentioned before, to be zoning compliant. These 8 or 9 buildings, approximately, if I remember correctly, are long-standing multifamily buildings. And again, we don't anticipate much changes on that. I think something very important that was mentioned before, we're finally, we're here, we're engaging with you, we're engaging with the community board leadership, and with whoever wants to participate in these conversations. This is the beginning. We have a long process in front of us. We've been talking with you, JD, with Joe, about a potential certification date. We're still working on that. We expect to have meetings with you. We're working with Jesse on maybe scheduling a debrief call for next week. So this is the beginning, and we're committed to continue working with you in this process. Prior certification and during your we'll have many opportunities to continue this dialogue. We appreciate again, JD, your openness, the openness of CB4 to engage with us, and we look forward to continue working with you. I think Ahmed mentioned before, and I think he's gonna ask to speak again. We will continue looking for opportunities to bring some of the concerns, work with you with the concerns that you raised tonight, look for opportunities to address them, and you know, we'll continue engaging with you. We have a few projects here with CB4, and if possible, we'll look into accommodate some of your concerns. Okay, but again, we're committed to continue working with you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Felipe. Those are encouraging words. Joe, you had you wanted to
first
speak?
I want to speak to the rezoning. Our community really understands this inside and out, unfortunately. Felipe, we have never taken any block that was zoned with a residential zone and rezoned to commercial in the preservation area since 1973, period. It is a huge break with precedent. It is not about making people at city planning happy to make the MTA building zoning compliant. You obviously don't have a lot of information about the protections on the buildings. In the information you sent us, you said they're protected through demolition. We have had an ongoing conversation for the past 5 years or 6 years with HPD about the lack of enforcement of the demolition restrictions throughout all of our special zoning districts. And as recently as 2 months ago, we have another building, 343 West 47th Street, with a permit issued in error by DOB, and it is partially demolished, and now there's a fire in that building. That's what happens here, because we have restrictions and we have zones, and what you consider not a big issue, every developer in the city of New York looks at a map, and they will see now there is a C62 block taken out of our R zone that goes all the way through the preservation area. We have persistently and consistently reduced the commercial or manufacturing zones. So it is not acceptable, and you need to begin to think how you redo this. Second, it is so common for whether it's private or public, those developers come and sit with Community Board 4 and talk about, we need to achieve X. How do we do it? And we talk about text changes. The reason I talk like this, I went to my first zoning meeting in this district in 1979. And I was taught this by my neighbors. We do text changes. We do this, we do that. We do not do rezonings. It creates a precedent. It is used by the private development community to bring further change. You're never going to convince us otherwise, because we've seen it empirically across our district. The idea of creating a new special permit, again, figure out a piece of text, how it can be done to make some projects happen. We understand that. Don't create things without coming and engaging with us, not in the months prior to certification. So now we have to double down and talk to you to figure out how to make things less hurtful and harmful. Because actually in this case, we have more experience than the folks sitting at city planning at this juncture. We really do. So please take that message back. That's so important. And Ahmed, I pitched that toward you. That is a major, major issue for us. I have 2 more items to bring on clarification. To Mr. Sawyer, talked about HIV, and I understand this. There's not even a question. We need this kind of housing in our community. But as part of the Western Rail Yards agreements, it was Community Board 4 that requested 150 units of SRO preservation of existing SROs. And so far, we've gotten 112 units in the Lantern building on West 51st between 8th and 9th. So to Aisha, we actually do look for balance, and we do look for a broad range of incomes. And between the rezonings and the public sites, that's what we're trying to do to serve everybody. It is shocking that in the one small piece that is for the moderate middle income, that comes out. So now we're going back to not serving everybody. On moderate middle income, I mentioned this to the HPD team before. My office, Clinton Housing, did a project on West 53rd Street with moderate middle income. For 103 apartments, we got over 60,000 applications. The majority of those applications were civil servants, people who work for the city of New York, because their combined incomes, 2 people living together, are above the low income limits. That's what we're trying to do, is to do this broad range of things. So people like you who sit here and have city jobs can actually afford to be in one of these apartments. So people like the woman who spoke, who had HIV and raised 2 kids, they don't have to move out of the city. They can take apartments here. And that's part of our goal. It's a broad goal. And the last piece is referrals. In our briefing on September 9th with the community board, it was noted that there will only be people with HASA or HIV be referred. It was corrected by the director of supportive housing that they would be majority homeless shelter referrals. So we need to get that very clear up front, because we can't have 2 messages. If HPD is telling us it's homeless shelter referrals and Housing Works is telling us, no, it's going to be people living in your community. So these are the items that sort of figure out. And I think those are my points from people who spoke. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Janine, I think there was a member of the public. I want to include everybody. Is there a member of the public that had a question with their hand raised? Janine, do you know?
Yeah, there's someone named Jared. I'm bringing them over.
Well, yeah, he wrote his question into the Q&A. I can read it if you'd rather do that. But if he's
Yes,
yes.
fine.
Hi, can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, Jared.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. My name is Jared Yates. I've lived on 53rd Street and 9th for the past 10 years with my wife and 2 children, 2 years old and 5 years old. So we're right across the street from Alfie's in Tacuba, where this development is going to be. I echo many of the sentiments around the need for middle-class housing in the neighborhood. But I would also add that, it seems very, very obvious, just thinking in the spirit of making something happen that works for the community, that there's 3 points that need to change straight away. It's the elimination of the commercial zoning piece. It's the reduction of the height of the building from 8 and 9 stories down to 6 and 7 stories, which is more in line with the nature of the neighborhood. And it's also an increase in the AMI. I asked a very simple question, which I'm shocked that nobody knew the answer to, which is, for this building, what is the median AMI and what is the median rent that the developer is planning on charging? And I did the math, and by my calculation, effectively, the developer will put the people who live in this building into rent poverty. And I think that's something we need to clearly understand. What is the AMI divided by the average rent per month for this building? If it is 70 to 80%, or even 60 to 70%, the people in this building are going to be poor, and they're not going to be able to afford to live in this neighborhood. And I'd just like a factual answer to that. What is average AMI in terms of annual income? And what is average rent for this building? And when you do A divided by B, what is the answer to that question?
There should have been a table, like it normally is in presentations, that give AMIs with the various income bands and the rents. So before we end, I will look up again just to give you the sort of range and then report it out, or I'll drop it in the chat. How does that sound?
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you so much, Joe. I would think that the developer would know this kind of thing off the top of their head, though, and that would be able to provide the income right away.
We actually have a chart. We actually have a chart in our presentation. If we could respond, Sarah actually has a chart.
Please, what's the answer? AMI divided by average income in percentage terms, please.
So the goal is that people pay no more than 30% of their income towards rent. That's just, the city sets the AMIs and also sets the rents that you can charge based off of the AMIs. So we would be following the city's protocol for, household income and rents, but if it's going to be an 80% AMI unit, you'd be, no matter what the income tier is, you're going to be paying 30% of your income towards rent.
That can't make mathematical sense. If you put back up the rent chart that you had and the rent per month, then these are people who are making $75,000, $80,000 a year, which is not in line with the AMI that you spelled out. The math smells very funny. It doesn't seem to work.
Could you just quote the income range for 80% from 1, 2, and 3 people, households? Mm-hmm. Just say that first, and then do the rents for the same thing, okay? Make it very simple.
Okay, so for a family size of 1, 80% AMI is $66,880. 2, it's $76,400. And 3, it's $85,920. Because we only have 2 and 3 bedrooms in the 80% AMI tier, those are the rents that I have in the chart in the presentation.
For a 2-bedroom at 80% AMI, it's $1,974 per month. For 3 bedrooms, $2,273 per month.
And those rents are 80% or are 30% of those incomes based upon the household size, correct?
Yes.
So I think again,
I've allowed Hudson to share their screen if someone wants to share their screen. I mean, so if it's easier for everybody. We
Sure.
Sure, hold on. Can you guys see this screen?
Yes.
So I was just calling out the 80% AMI tier for the family sizes 1, 2, and 3. Those were these 3 numbers. And then the 2 and 3 bedroom rents for the 80% AMI tier.
And those actually are 30% of a month of annual income divided by 12.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I copied these directly from the HPD website. So that's where this is coming from.
And the only thing I'll add to Sarah's comment is that AMI, as many of you know, since you've been through this process, is a standard that we get from the federal government based on a metropolitan area that is more than the 5 boroughs. And we try to build term sheets walking back from that, since a lot of our projects are a mix of funding from federal, state, and city, and use these standards, which we can provide more. Yes.
And versus the market, a 2-bedroom would, for a new building, would rent at $5,500 a month, at least in our neighborhood, if not more. And a 3-bedroom would be close to $7,000 or over $7,000. So certainly these are more affordable. The problem, as we've noted, it eliminates the families who are the 2-income earners, who are the civil servants, who are the folks who are the teachers, because they make more. They make $60,000 or $70,000 each, and they may have a child and they don't have an opportunity. That's why we're going to keep coming back to that, to help you work through why we work together to make a compromise, to figure out how to make the whole Western Rail Yards work. We're not talking about this site alone. It's in a context. And I think you've hopefully understood why we held with that argument, because that's the most important part for us, from the neighborhood that we're trying to preserve and redevelop, as opposed to the site or the affordable housing site, or just the one demographic that we're trying to help.
Thank you, Joe. I think we can take this. Thank you, Jesse, for that. Any committee members? Dale, did you have another question or comment?
I had a question specifically on the disposition of affordable units, which is, I see that there are studios and then 2 and 3 bedrooms. Of all the affordable units, I don't know if it was presented and I missed it because I'm on a phone. What's the disposition? How many studios? How many 2 bedrooms? How many 3 bedrooms?
Sure. If I can share my screen again, I will share that.
You can pull it back up, Sarah.
Okay. So this is the unit distribution with the AMIs. So just looking at the affordable housing between 40 and 80% AMI, you can see that that's mostly 2 bedrooms, with the 2, 3 bedrooms in the project in the 60 and 70% AMI tier.
So 54 2-bedroom units?
Total, yes.
Yeah.
12
and
12,
2, 3.
Yeah.
So it's of the affordable, a bulk of the affordable units are 2 bedrooms.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer.
Yep.
Thanks, Dale. I think we can thank everybody. We can.
JD?
I hear a voice. Yes.
Yes, sorry, this is Ahmed. I just wanted to just say 1 or 2 more things. I understand it's 9 o'clock. I will be very brief. I want to start off by reiterating, I always I shiver when I hear the words, things are done deals. We don't believe it's a done deal. The reason why we come to the public and we have these meetings is because we understand that there is a discretionary process that is ahead of us. There is a number of steps that we still have to go, and each one of them is dependent on continued engagement. At no point is anything a done deal. I also want to say that from HPD, we do want to do more around moderate and middle. We have both new construction and preservation tools that we've tried to leverage to make that happen. We've done that, in partnership with CB4 and other people on the ground in this community and on all the communities that make up CB4. And so this is obviously a conversation that we want to continue having. The POA and the commitment to look at units up to 165% AMI is something I know that people worked very hard and are pushing the city to do more in the moderate and middle. We are faced, and things actually have slightly changed from a housing perspective since that POA. We've seen a greater need on both ends. We often find it difficult to be able to create units for both sides. We saw an opportunity that we still think fits within the RFP, which did list supportive housing as a particular option. And we
as a
are
source
hoping,
of financing on it, as a source, not as an option.
Joe, with all due respect, on page 9 of the RFP under type of development, it does list supportive housing as an option. I'm not arguing that it was the dominant type or what people had argued should be the type of housing. I just wanted to be clear that respondents to the RFP saw that as an option for development. And then the only other thing I'll just continue to reiterate is the comments from this meeting is feedback that we are going to take seriously. I will continue to reiterate that we will come back not only to talk about the zoning or the income mix, but there are other parts of the project, as you heard tonight, that we're still continuing to work on because we're trying to figure out other ways that this project is a better fit for the issues that have been brought up, or better ways that we can improve upon the proposal. And that's what this is. This is a proposal. So we'll continue to come back and talk about this project. And I do want to say we appreciate the opportunity to come to you. We thank the development team. They've done a lot of work. They have done engagement. We, both HPD and the development team, are happy to continue to talk to more members of the community, talk to the board about what these issues are. And we see this as one step in a longer engagement process.
Thank you very much, Ahmed.
Thank you, Ahmed. I want to thank Sarah, James, Andrew, Aaron, Paris, all the members. I'm going to call on Jesse Bodine. Are you there, Jesse?
You just went on mute.
You're there.
Sorry. Sorry, everybody. I rarely do this, and I'm nowhere as knowledgeable as Joe, or have lived in the neighborhood as long as Christine and Chris and JD and the others. But I just want to raise two things. One thing that Joe had highlighted is that my experience here as a district manager since I've been here is we have just seen building after building in this, particularly in the Hell's Kitchen area, that get demo permits permitted when they shouldn't get permitted, and they fall through the cracks through DOB. And we have been trying to find solutions for these buildings for years, and I think we have one that we've successfully sort of gotten through. But this takes so much work, right? So once you open up the can of worms on something, you've got a building that's half demoed, you've got facades removed, you've got people moved out already because they've either took a buyout, or they saw a sign on their door saying we're going to demo this building, and they don't know any better and they leave. And so we have been asking HPD and DCP to fix the loopholes in the text, particularly around the anti-demo language, for years. It was a promise that Corey Johnson made through the Garment Center rezoning, and it never got done. And in public. And I will just say, if HPD is sincere in their statement in this presentation that they don't think this is going to have an impact on the surrounding buildings, then they should go ahead and fix those loopholes in the language of the anti-demo clauses and the other materials that we have sent already many times over that Joe has provided. So that's one thing I would like just to flag that, if we want to have that conversation, I just think it should be something that we should talk about. And the other thing is, I just want to go back and say that there's always going to be language in RFPs that leave doors open for other, other types of development. But I want to say that I'm quoting literally from the HPD press release that was sent out when this original RFP went out. And it says, quote, proposals must provide affordable housing for a mix of incomes and comply with provisions of the Western Rail Yard rezoning points of agreement. And I'll just end it at that. So that was the intent. That was the goal. And that's what we all agreed to. And that wasn't 10 years ago. That was a few years ago.
And Jesse, sorry, this is Ahmed again. Just to respond to that last point, the Western Rail Yard's point of agreement called for, and the agreement was to include units up to 165% AMI. I wasn't part of those conversations, but I honestly believe that there was definitely a discussion about more moderate and middle. The folks around the virtual table of CB4 was heavily involved and trying to make sure that there was a mix of mixed income housing in the neighborhood. So I'm not refuting that. I am making the point that, as you can see from this administration, past administrations, as the housing crisis has changed and taken different forms, we have had to find ways to respond to those issues. And so this is where we are in trying to respond to this issue. I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that to try to limit or cut off the possibility for what we're going to be continuing to work on with the board, with the community, and in the other steps of Europe. But I just want to really emphasize that it's not our intention to come with something completely different. We were faced with this crisis, and we were trying to deal with that issue through an RFP that we had worked on and responded and asked for responses from the public. Nonetheless,
Ahmed,
yes.
it's Lowell. I want to respond to that.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is how you're defining the housing crisis. And what you heard tonight from members of the public is I can define a housing crisis in that middle income people can no longer afford to live on the island of Manhattan. And to me, and to protect this neighborhood, that is a crisis just as much as the homeless situation. And it's how you define the crisis that is, your definition of the crisis is leading you to a certain answer. And I can define the crisis differently that will lead me to a different answer. And unless we're going to sit down and work on this together, we're not going to get anywhere.
I think let me just, I think that you are right that the crisis comes in different forms. I think that, and I have not made an eloquent point of it, that we have different tools for how we try to address the crisis at different levels. We have found the most effective tool for trying to meet the costs of our extra low and low income is often being able to leverage the availability of now, quickly less available public land. But that being said, we've heard loud and clear from folks here. We've heard loud and clear in our history as an agency, in our work in the community.
You told us to do this, Ahmed. That's the crazy part.
Yeah.
Rafael Sestero convinced me when he was deputy commissioner, this was the way to go.
Yeah.
I believe that the public site should have the lowest income housing, because that's what that's how I worked. We were convinced it cannot work that way because of all this inclusionary housing. It would be instead the private sector that would provide the lowest income, and the way to balance it was take the public sites and program them for moderate middle. And that was a Sean Donovan, all these people who are, they're not, just because they're gone doesn't mean that they weren't part of a history here.
Yes, also, I recognize that.
And so that's why there's a lot of frustration. And on the homeless side, we did our research too, looked at your websites and everything. You know, the homeless population was like 50,000 in 2013, goes to 58,000 in 2014, 2015, 65,000, now it's 59,000. It has not gone up all that dramatically. We've had a homeless crisis for decades, period. And we are part of the solution. We are part
As I
of it.
said in the beginning, I've said CB4 has been a partner, and I do want to see, along with, I know the development team is equally as interested in finding ways to continue to talk to you about this, given that CB4 has been a partner in the housing crisis.
We thank you very much.
Ahmed. I think
JD,
I'm going to try to wrap this up.
Yeah, I think I was going to say, I think it's
Go
time
ahead,
to wrap
Lowell.
this up. I think it's time to wrap this up, JD. I was giving it
Yeah,
back to
thank you, Lowell. I want to wrap this up. I want to thank all of HPD. I want to thank all the committee members and all of the public for speaking about this. This has been somewhat disturbing to me on multiple levels, as I'm sure it has been for many members of the community. I want you to take back, and Ahmed, I know you are a person who really has your heart in doing the right thing. I want all of HPD to take back the understanding that this community felt betrayed, that trust is terribly important. If you don't have trust in government, things break down. It's very important that we reestablish that trust. And Ahmed, I welcome your comments that we can start working together to achieve something. I'm also disturbed that the justification seems to be changing. This is not what we heard 2 years ago. This is not what we heard 4 years ago. It seems to be changing why we are doing it this way. We need to sit down and work this out, and I think we can do it. My last comment is, yes, there is a crisis in the city, but neighborhoods that function well, that work together is really the solution. And our job on this committee is to preserve the special district. That is our mandate. And that's what we should all be trying to work towards. So I'm sorry for my comments, but I think this has been a good discussion. And Ahmed, we're going to take you at your word that we will continue and try to work out things.
Yes,
And
sir.
thanks to the Hudson companies and also Housing Works.
Yes, I'm
for
sorry.
feeling
I
this
forgot to
out
mention
inside
Hudson.
and outside. Right.
Yes, I thank Sarah and Aaron and Hudson as well. We have one more item, but before we go there, is there a motion? Dolores, you had, Dolores?
Yes.
Dolores.
Yes, I'd like to propose, as we always do, to document that we've had this meeting. I think it's very clear that we are not in favor of the project as presented. And again, I mean that not to disrespect what Hudson is doing and what Housing Work is trying to do. But because of the fact that it is not a fit for the neighborhood, it does not go ahead and provide the balance that we need. And it reneged on agreements that were already written into place that do fit our need. I think we need to go ahead and document that this was the beginning of a discussion, but that overwhelmingly that this committee and what we heard from the public that we're deeply disappointed, and we need to reestablish trust to begin this conversation to bring this project to fruition in a way that is fitting for the community at large.
And as close as possible to the original commitment. That's the thing.
Yeah. That's my motion.
I second that motion.
Thank you.
Now we have a board meeting coming up. So Dolores, you're going to write that letter by Wednesday.
Sure, if we can vote on it.
I'm just pointing that out. We have a very tight frame here.
We have a history of letters on this topic, which will make this actually very easy for us to add our new comments. Because again, as we've outlined, this is a history of decades of working to identify the site, to define what is needed in this community, and to compromise with HPD at the time on how to get to that place. So it will be easy to write that letter. Happy to do that, but we need to vote.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion about this motion and this letter?
Please, no.
If not, I'm sorry, Joe?
Please, no more discussion.
No? All in favor? All in favor, please raise your hand so we can, okay, any opposition to the letter? Anybody opposed? Any present not eligible? So that's that. I want to thank HPD and Hudson and the committee and the community. We have one
Another
more
item.
quick, one more item. It's about the budget. Bob Benfato, are you
You can
here?
all leave, guys.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you all.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you all so
Yeah.
much. Thank you
Have a
so
great
much,
night.
guys. Have a good
Yeah,
evening.
from Housing Works, thank you for having me.
Take care.
Bob, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm watching everyone disappear. And
Okay.
this will be quick. When you're not voting on it till next month. October is when you put in budget requests for the city of New York at the community board level. It comes out of the statement of district needs, which you probably voted for at the end of July. And the statement of district needs, besides for budgets, also does policy and a whole bunch of things for the city. This is more geared towards the budget. The budget, the city of New York, usually it's more than one thing. We call it one thing, but it's an expense budget, it's a capital budget, it's a contract budget, it's a revenue budget. Primarily what we respond to is expense and capital. And the expense boards tends to be the same thing over and over again, year after year, especially for our committee, which is really just extra money for city planning staff and extra money for landmark staff. And sometimes we piggyback off the housing committee and ask for extra money on buildings staff, since there's certain things they're interested in that the buildings department has control over. And then the capital is the other part we do, which are usually projects that came out of the land use reviews we pulled in, like this one, which has a government component. So as usually we have a new one we think of, sometimes an old one that's new and that it hasn't happened yet, so we keep putting it on the list. And then we have what they call CS, which is continuing support, which are those projects we'd advocated for that are in the works and have been funded, and we just wanted to continue on, which is important to look at this year because since the pandemic, there's been a concern of capital projects and how they're proceeding going forward, whether they're getting the adequate amount of money from OMB. So Janine sent you a Dropbox that gives you the list of everything last year. So take a look at it. Think about anything you want to be new. And so that when we meet again in October, we can go through it quickly, item by item, and see if we want to do the same rankings as we did last year and or add anything new.
Thank you, Bob.
We should just put our DOB request in for special district enforcement again, like always, you know?
Yeah, it's there. Everything's in, everything from last year is there.
Paul, you had your hand up?
Thank you.
I do. Just to let everybody know, in my role as co-chair of Chelsea Land Use, so reporting out to you guys on that. We had the similar discussion about many of the carryover items and CS items and expense and capital items, whatever. A couple of new items have come up for us that we're going to do some looking into. So if people in this committee want to be involved in that, you can work with us on that. That'd be great. One is on the resiliency issues. We had the zoning text amendment on resiliency. So we're going to look into some specific issues that could impact Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen. So if anybody has thoughts on that. Clearly, historic districts are important to us in Chelsea. We have somebody looking into some of the open streets issues to see if we want to tackle some of that on a budget level. And then someone's looking into vacant storefronts as an item for budget issues. So that's coming out of Chelsea Land Use. If others have other ideas and want to plug in with us, let us know. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. I want to make a special thanks to Janine for organizing this meeting, and Jesse Bodine for being here with us and getting through this evening. So is there a motion to
Adjourn?
have a beer?
Second.
All in favor. Thank you all so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great job, JD. Great job.
Yeah.
Good night.
Night.
Good
And
night.
Bob, this is not a liquor store we were talking about. The comparison was moot.